what even really is self-honesty? Because I hear Cameron in certain times where we'll have conversations with people and you'll say, if you're really honest with yourself, you'll see this. And I would always struggle with that because I was like, shit, like am I even honest? I guess I'm not fully honest with myself because to me, as I've been going through this process, I've realized that self dishonesty is thinking that you're actually just separate from everything. You're like, I'm good. I'm just me. I'm here in my little bubble. But self honesty is realizing, no, I am actually part of this whole, and it's my responsibility to realize that. And then all these problems out there in the world where I'm pointing my finger and I'm blaming other people and I'm saying, oh, if it's just the government's fault. Oh, it's just this group, that group. That's actually dishonesty when the
Yeah.
real self-honesty would be realizing that's my responsibility to actually go figure that out. So I wanted to kick that off with like, I still am not sure if I'm really understanding self-honesty. I've been at this for a while.
I think it'd be valuable to bring it to like the more personal level because obviously, Mitch, you're thinking on a much bigger scale than I think where most people are at, where it's like, how would self honesty look as an individual? Not so much about the problems in this world is not my fault, but more so like on a interpersonal level or maybe something that you're going through in yourself.
Well, let me address the point of what you said first, Mitch, and I think we can go into that area because we want to make it so people can relate to it. Um, but in the context of what you're saying is like, that is the basis of self-honesty, is realizing you're not in your own little bubble actually,
Mm.
right? You're actually here in reality. You affect other people affect you. What you get, what you're giving is what you're receiving, and what you're giving is also what other people are receiving, and that's affect you see it's all connected, right? So I think what you said, Mitch, was a great way of looking at it. And that's how I look at it too. And I've also, because I'm still walking my process, but I remember being in that same point where it's like, oh, self-honesty is that point of it's separation, it's being separate from something, and self-honesty is not being separate, right? But the act of self-honesty versus like the state of self-honesty is kind of what we're looking at. Meaning, if when I say, when you brought up that point of when I say, oh, if you were really honest, you would realize this, right? When I say something like that, what I'm looking at is the thing that you're looking at. You think you understand why it's occurring or what the solution is, but you're not being honest with yourself, meaning you're still holding on to some preference that you have, which is already a part of you, probably from the time you were born, maybe, or at some point in your developmental phase or whatever. And that is creating a bias towards what you're willing to consider as what the problem is actually, or what the solution is. And so when I say, if you were being honest with yourself, it's like, if you were to take yourself back to that starting point of, wait, it's about being one and equal with reality. It's about what I do affects everything else, and whatever else is doing is affecting me. If I take it back to that starting point, and then I start looking at this problem from there, like if I start moving from that starting point, then I'm going to start seeing, oh, I'm holding on to a bias that's actually still has the starting point of I'm still in my own bubble. I'm allowed to be in my own bubble. My opinions are my opinions, and it doesn't matter what the effect is in reality because I create my own reality. You see what I mean? So self-honesty is, in other words, so just to give more clarity on when I say something like, if you're being honest with yourself, you would realize XYZ. The reason I'm saying it like that is because that's what it took for myself, meaning I'm not giving you the answer I would prefer it to be, or I like it to be, or I always thought it to be. Like if you're this religion or this religion, they'll argue with each other about, because they both hold certain fundamental assumptions about, who created reality or some particular topic. They're never going to agree with each other unless one gives. So the only way to come to an agreement is if both let go of everything they believe they know and come back to the same starting point. So when I say, if you were being honest with yourself, you'd realize it's because that's what I was doing for myself. Meaning I'm not giving you my preconceived answer. I'm giving you my walking my process of self-honesty realization of this is the situation. This is the reality, because I had to remove my layers of not wanting it to be that way or preferring it to be a different way so that I can stay the way I am and not have to change something. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. That's really cool. Like the whole point of if you were self-honest with yourself, you could come to this same conclusion as well.
Right.
And I've realized in talking to people just recently that so many people will speak to you in those ideas that they have memorized, essentially, where they've heard something really nice and they'll just repeat over and over again, and they'll say the right words. But I'm seeing now more clearly that, okay, but you don't actually understand what that means. You haven't really actually investigated that. You haven't seen it for yourself. You haven't really made the decision that this is what it is because you know it. You're just saying that because you're echoing what somebody else said.
What's an example? Because you're 100% on this point. Like, what would be an example?
I guess the most recent example that I'm thinking of right now is I was asking someone what okay. I've actually been asking this a lot this week. What is the purpose of life? Right? And a lot of people will tell you, and I hear this all the time. The number one answer that I get, purpose of life is to be happy. It's like, what? Okay, all right. Well, let's go with that. Let's say that is the purpose of life. Let's say the purpose of life is to be happy. I like that. I want to be happy. You want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy, right? Okay, but some people are entitled to more happiness than others. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, and not that they're entitled to it. It's just that they have access to more. You know, you look at someone in the position of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or anybody who's a billionaire. They have more access to do whatever the fuck they want. They can, okay, remember when you were a kid and you wanted to go to outer space, you wanted to build a rocket or whatever. Guess what? These guys can actually do that. They actually have the funds where they can build the rockets, they can send them into outer space, and they can do it over and over again. They can fail, they can do it. It's like almost like a big game.
Like a game, yeah.
Like they're a 9-year-old kid with $1 billion getting to do whatever they want to do.
Exactly. Okay, so, I mean, can't you see they can actually do the things that millions and billions of other kids are just dreaming about, right? But then let's take it even another notch down. We are all in a position where we're all in the first world. You know, we can easily go to the grocery store, get our groceries. We can, drink clean water. We know we have access to a toilet, which takes our shit away from us. And we don't have to live in these unsanitary, conditions at all. We have clothes, we have shelter. We've got so many nice things here where we can pursue happiness, right? We may not be able to get to the level of these billionaires, but, there's a lot that we have access to. And it feels like for us, and this is, the vast majority of people that I'm talking to are in this position as well. It feels like, I'm in control of things. It feels like I can control at least my happiness. And so it's really easy to just say, life is about being happy. But then if you look at 99% of the rest of the world, remember we looked up, what it takes to be in the top 1%, it's only 34,000, Yeah. So 99% of the rest of the world is making less than that. They are struggling just to put food on the table. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen here. I'm just saying that the vast majority of everyone on the planet is in a struggle where they can't even think about just happiness. They're thinking about, how the fuck do I eat? Like, how do I make sure my kids stay alive?
And you ever hear this? I know you guys have heard this before, where somebody says, well, because where you're basically going with this, if it's not obvious to everybody else, is that having money is going to enable you to pursue happiness in a different, more expansive way, right? Than if you have no money. Yeah. But then, of course, you're going to get that objection of, well, but I went to Ecuador on vacation or something, and I saw the people in the villages, and they had no money, and they were the happiest people on earth. But it's like, well, then why didn't you sell all your possessions and stay there? Because you could. Like, you could literally just go and take what you have, which would probably buy you one of the little buildings there, because they don't have much money according to this logic, right? And then just go live there. But that's not, you know what I mean? Like, isn't that it's, to me, it's okay. Like Mitch said, if you're being honest with yourself, you will realize that you're saying that because you're just justifying them being poor, and you don't want to look past the point of what we're saying, that money, that to pursue happiness requires money. Because if you were honest with yourself, you'd realize 99.9% of the stuff that you think is going to make you feel that happiness you're searching for requires money. You know, like you want to go out and have a fun time with your friends. Well, you can't go to the club because you can't spend money. You can't watch the football game because you don't have any money. Well, I'll watch it for free on TV. Okay. Why is that football game happening? Isn't it because they're advertising? Like if none of those people were making money, would they be doing it? So doesn't your happiness in the enjoyment of that football game even require the existence of other people valuing money? And, you know, like the players, they're just doing it because they're passionate about the game. Well, then why don't they do it for like 32,400? Do you know what I mean? Like why are they looking at $10 million and all that? Like, so the self-honesty is going, okay, hold on. What am I accepting deep down that's allowing me to jump to all these conclusions over here? And I think you're breaking it down so well, Drake, a perfect example of this, because it's like looking at how if you're not honest, you'll just jump to some point and then you're arguing with someone at this level and a solution can never come from that. Because what if people not having money is a source of unhappiness? But then you're saying life is all about the pursuit of money, but also money doesn't require happiness.
Yeah.
So
Then aren't we always going to have conflict of people who are unhappy if it's the case that these things, you know, these points are true?
Yeah.
Right.
What were you saying, Nasif?
He said like, I think what Karen meant to say, I think was, you know, people are saying that life is about the pursuit of happiness, and happiness requires money.
Right.
Right. You had said like people are saying that life is the pursuit of money.
Oh, I said it backwards. Yeah.
But it's essentially the same thing, though.
It's true, yeah.
You know,
people just don't realize it. Yeah.
They don't realize that's what they're saying. Is like it's all about the pursuit of money. But this is the point that I'm making, though, as well, is that, oh, okay, so you want money. Everybody wants money. Everybody wants money. Why? Oh, so I can, you know, go and enjoy my life and just like, so you can fucking live. That's why you want money, right? So wouldn't it just make sense if we all were at the starting point of everybody has at least what they need to live? Like people are just trying to fucking live and just actually create relationships. Like it's not about, like if you think that life is about making money, you've been sold a dream. You've been sold an idea that life is about money, but we give money value. Like life
But
comes
don't you
from
see how people
us.
cover this up?
Yeah.
We don't want to admit that we actually believe life is about making money.
Yeah.
Because we're telling ourselves a lie that it's about pursuing happiness.
Yeah.
But that is also a sales job. Because happiness to us means having money to do something. Okay, it's like, you know, we're not talking to Jeff Bezos right now. If he's listening, that's cool, but that's not who we're trying to get to. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not who we're trying to get through to.
Right.
So let's take the average person in the first world who would have the time and the inclination to listen to a podcast. Okay, you can't watch Netflix anymore because it's all about money, right? So that requires money. That wouldn't exist without money. So let's just take it out of the equation. You can't listen to Spotify anymore. You can't order.
You don't have
Uber.
access to internet.
You can't use the internet. You can't drive anywhere. You can't even wear clothing that you didn't like make by hand from like growing the cotton yourself. I know that's going to trigger people, right? But you see what I mean? Like literally you can't benefit at all from the economic system. Yeah. So if you take all that away, how would you feel? If you guys are being honest with yourself as that person,
I feel like
how would you
shit. I'd feel
feel? Yeah,
like
you'd
shit.
be like, fuck, I need to make some money. I need to get a job. It's like that. And this is one of those points again, if you're being honest with yourself, you'll admit that. If you have no interest in being honest with yourself, you'll just sit here and listen to this and go, no, it's about happiness and it's about this. And I'll say, how do you know? And someone will come up with some reason, because something in the Bible, or because something this thing said, or this book said, or this guru said. They said it, so therefore I have an authority who's I've got it on good authority. This is the answer, so I don't need to look past it. I don't need to go into myself and look at what I assumed. And the way you broke it down was so good, Drake, because that's one of the things, like when we first met, always I admired about you from the perspective, like I respected it. Like you're willing to be honest. And we all go through phases where, you know, we kind of don't want to be honest with ourselves, but then you're always coming back to that point of like, all right, I have to like look at this point. Right. But more than many of the people that I interact with on a daily basis, like, you know, from the broader perspective of just my family, right? It's like you're always willing to push that point of looking past it, you know? And I think that also, you can speak for yourself, but I think that comes from a genuine, I don't know if desire is the right word, but it's like you want to improve, you know, and
Yeah.
you don't want to be limited, right? And I think that's, all of us are like that in this group here. But I just wanted to comment on the point that you broke it down so well, because when you brought up that point about someone says life is just about happiness, right? Or pursuing happiness or being happy, or however they might phrase it. Everything you said after that was looking beyond that as a true statement, like questioning it for a moment and going, maybe, you know, what actually is enabling this? It's like looking at stuff that's actually doing research. You know, we were talking about this before the podcast. Like, what does it mean when we say we're doing research? In one context, it means I'm being self-honest. I'm looking and investigating within myself. I'm doing research within myself as to how did I get to this conclusion? Where did this idea or thought come from?
Oh, wow. That's a cool word. Search
What?
and research. You're searching again. It's like,
Right.
okay, I've heard the answer, but let me research it and just really understand, is this what it is or what I've accepted?
Right. So then here's the point I want to end on with this little statement is, how many people, when they say life is about pursuing happiness, have put any time or thought into investigating beyond that statement?
None.
So the average person, and when I say average, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean the average person who's accepted a lot of things, they haven't really specifically begun walking this process. Walking this process doesn't make us better than anybody else, but it is a point where most people are not doing it yet. So when I say average, just to be clear, that's what I mean. They haven't yet questioned most of the things that they accept at a fundamental level. So all the stuff that you're saying to me, and I'm sure to you, is like totally obvious. You just like, bam, 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 what about this and this and this and this? But each one of those points can represent sort of like a trap door where the person goes, yeah, you had me here, but then I'm not going here anymore, you know? And so this is not something you can do for another person. You can sort of light the way and explain things and show them, and you know, you can watch videos, but a person themselves has to take this on and be like, I want to let go of what's not real within me and be honest about it and really go to the point of clarity within myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so one thing that I see as a trap as well is somebody listening in on this conversation, or somebody who's heard, you know, us or someone else even saying this before, of like the purpose of life, or, you know, okay, it's not to be happy, you know, it's to do what's best, right? They'll just echo that and they won't even investigate that. And that's really like another point that I see really strongly, where people are not being self-honest again, because they don't understand why that is. They haven't actually looked at it for themselves to have the answer for themselves. It's kind of like, you know how KT talks about when you're reading a book, you read and then you think about what you read, right? And I used to think, when I first heard that, I used to think, oh, you read and then afterwards you close the book and you go, that was really nice. I like that. That's what I thought that meant, right?
Yeah.
And then now I understand, because now I naturally do this because I've obviously improved my processing ability. But now when I read, it's like, oh, I actually explain it to myself. And I come up with why that makes sense within myself. And that's me going into, oh, okay, but, and then I'm like, I'm working things out. And so when I write my blog, and actually, Mitch, you've helped me a lot with this, you know, with, actually Jess has helped me, but suggesting, you know, okay, read the blogs, Creation's Journey, Heaven's Journey, and then go and put it into your Techno Tutor, and then read it again. And when I did that, and I know, Cam, you suggested that when I first started doing that, but I fell off, you know? But when I started doing it again, I could see, oh, wow, I see much more of this. This makes so much sense. And then I would just get excited and just start, okay, let me write my blog now. And then as I'm writing my blog, I'm writing to really bring forth the point within myself of, okay, what is it that I understand? What is it that I'm seeing here? And what is it that, how can I explain this in a way that, okay, I get it, you know, and I can look back on what I've written and go, yeah, that fucking makes sense. Wow. You know? And so that's what I'm saying as far as what I see as self-honesty. People don't do that. They don't, and I don't know why they don't do it, but
I know why, Drake.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mitch.
I know why, because this was me 1 year ago. Is one, I was lazy and I wasn't being honest with myself that I was just being lazy.
What do you mean by lazy?
I wanted to figure out just enough so I could make money and I could have my happiness and then
Just
I'd be
keep going,
good.
Yeah.
And so it's like I wanted to just figure out enough without, you know, really have, you know, like you comprehend just enough basically. But inherently that was accepting another limitation. And then I met you guys and I saw just the extent to which y'all were pushing yourself and really serious about fundamentally improving your lives and the lives of everyone in the world. And that was really inspiring to me. And it took a little while for me to understand that, but then I adopted it very quickly. And that's when everything in my life really improved because I got clear. I got really honest on my starting point. And then I moved forward from there. Because now I enjoy that same process that Drake is talking about. I'll read something that's challenging. Like I was reading the Robert Kiyosaki book on financial intelligence. I did not really understand it. So I put it in TechnoTutor. Because for those who aren't aware of how that works is those words like inflation and all that was not actually part of me on a subconscious level. I didn't actually really know what that word meant.
On a physical level.
On a physical level, yeah. And so I put it in with TechnoTutor, and then I read it again, and it clicked, and it made sense. I said, "Oh my God, this is why I need to invest my money in these ways and over this timeline." And I was like, "How did I not see that before? It's so obvious now." But now I get it why I didn't see it because one, I didn't have the tools to actually see it, and two, I had this habit of basically being lazy, where I would just try to figure out enough to be good, and then not really push much further.
But weren't you also doing a lot of work?
Oh, yeah, I was definitely doing a lot of work.
So is it laziness or is it still accepting a point of limitation
Yeah,
you don't want to let go of?
I suppose ignorance is part of it. Like I was ignoring the fact that well,
what I'm saying is those are all at the level of judgment. So if you go past that, because like, yeah, you're ignoring it. Okay, you were being lazy, all those things. But what was the core point if you go beyond that?
As it's like the laziness was a result of
that I was accepting that I couldn't actually get smart enough or fundamentally change myself to become a true.
Now, where are you interested in really fundamentally making a difference?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the point, like the ignorance and all those points is something that you were still just accepting.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Like accepting, like this is as far as I can go. This is where my limit is.
Mm-hmm.
Then everything else comes on as sort of like a justification of that.
As in,
now,
Mitch,
yeah,
I was going to say, you remember when, and you don't talk about this anymore, which is interesting, but I remember when your focal point was like, yeah, like in order to make a difference, like I need to have the financial freedom where I can rent Airbnbs every weekend if I wanted to and have all that money that's coming in. It was like centered around the lifestyle of being able to go and make a difference. As in, it's like make the money and then, and I think that's, I know that's where I started from. And it's like, it's using everything that we're learning to fit it into as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing, as long as I can keep making money the way I want to make money.
That's where the self-dishonesty is. Exactly. It's like, whatever you're saying, how can I fit it into what I already have been programmed to accept? And we were talking about this on another meeting last week or this previous week, that point of like your pre-programming being a point that keeps you sort of feeling comfortable or feeling not like extreme resistance to something. Right. And so then when you see the extreme resistance, you don't want to go there. But when you're being honest about this point, if you truly want to make a difference, does that mean, okay, I want to make a difference if it fits into my preconceived idea of what I want to do with my life and how I want to experience myself? Or do I actually want to make a difference? And I need to now, like, I need to adjust what I want to experience and what my preferences are according to practically what is required.
And Cameron, that's what you and I talked about
Wow.
with me being an actor and everything. And you're like,
Yeah.
you know, you like within yourself, you're like, I could see that. I know that the system wants to use your potential for this point,
Right.
and you could see that there. I could express that to a greater degree to have a bigger impact. But at the time, I was like, I was loving our conversations, going to the gin events, talking to Drake, talking to you, talking to. I'm like, my God, like I really do see how to change the world. So I'm just gonna keep acting harder. It's like it was like me fitting it all into. Oh, I just have to keep going deeper with this until there was a certain point in Technotutor where I was like, I did one of the processes with Technotutor, and I just sat there for like an hour of like purpose. It was like I was going through a list. It was like purpose came up, and I was going through the another layer of the process, and then going through that word, right? And it was like that day, I was like, oh, and it wasn't like emotional. It was me reasoning it out and then being like, oh, I can't be an actor anymore. If I actually want to make a difference for all of these reasons that I can see for myself, I can't. But it took me like a year and a half to realize that.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
This podcast, I know people are going to feel uncomfortable listening to this because you are going to be challenged on fundamentally who you've accepted yourself to be. And I encourage you, listen through to the end, because I remember going through this exact same point where I had my e-commerce business. I was good. Every weekend, I'd still go out with my friends. Like it was all nice and neat and like fitting into my reality. But I would have these moments where people would challenge me, and I knew there was something to it, but I didn't necessarily know how to go into it. I didn't have the full self-confidence in myself to actually really like be able to look at the thing. You know, it's like the monster in the closet. I'm like, avoid it, kind of look at it. Okay, avoid it more. Now, and at a certain point, I was like, you know what? Let me just go full on, open the doors, look at the monster, so to speak, and then like really investigate it, research it. And then I went through that, like we call firewalls. And I went through it through the support of all you guys and other people who are in the Self-Perfected Facebook group. And that, I am so freaking grateful that I did that, because I would be so screwed if I didn't change. And I just accepted my limitations, especially now, seeing how the state of the world, like because about 8 months ago, I really took on like, yes, I'm willing to do what it takes to make the world be a place that's actually best for all. Now getting here, it's like, I'm so glad I made that decision back then, because now I'm positioned
Because
in
we
like a
met
really
you
great way.
in like
Last August.
August in
Yeah.
Denver,
Mhm.
and it's basically the beginning of July now.
Oh my God.
Things
Good
have
for you,
changed.
Mitch.
Like from my perspective, nothing has changed in the world.
Mhm.
Meaning, when I say from my perspective, I don't just mean like in my personal experience. I mean, I could see everything that's going on right now under the surface, because when you go far enough and you look at it clearly, you can see, well, eventually this is going to have to happen because these things are in conflict, right?
Mhm.
That's not being like psychic or something. It's just clearly seeing what the conclusion of certain things are. Most people aren't willing to be honest with themselves enough to see those variables. You see,
Do
so
you
that's
have like
one
an
of the
example or
advantages.
two? For instance, like how coronavirus was like a trigger point, and now that expedited automation, more clamped down. That is that what you're talking about?
Yes, but I guess in a more fundamental way, if we just take it back to the point we were talking about originally that Drake brought up about that pursuit of happiness point, right? It might seem like I'm going off topic here, but I'm going to bring it back to your point. The pursuit of happiness point is really a running away from fear, right? It's actually a fear of being in poverty. It's actually a fear of being in hell, of having negative experience. So the pursuit of happiness is trying to search for this positive thing because you're actually afraid of the negative part, and you're using the happiness, the positive part, to cover up your actual negative part. So how do you know what I'm saying is true is, again, if you're being honest with yourself, how many of the moments throughout your entire life have you experienced what you would call genuine happiness? Okay. Now, again, like Drake pointed out, if you're a Bill Gates, maybe a lot of them, but if you're a quote average person, probably not many. you know, you'll have those moments. That's why we have holidays and shit, in one sense, right? Because we can have those moments. They're very artificial though, and they're not. I mean, again, if you're being honest with yourself, is Christmas time really that fucking amazing? Or is it all the hype that you're creating within yourself about it? It's not the actual thing itself, any of that, that's actually really amazing. It's just all of the, what it symbolizes to you and all this other stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it's like what you're covering up within yourself. It's the actual fear of not having a purpose. So you pretend like your purpose is to be happy. So all of that being said, and some people, they might have to take 2 years to realize what I'm saying on that one. But the point is, if you can, for a moment, accept that premise or consider it, if all of that's going on within everybody and we're just trying to cover shit up by pretending to be happy and buying shit and doing all this stuff, then the moment something happens where that stuff is taken away, the stuff that you've been using to feel happy is like not really there. Like, you don't know how to be happy. You don't know how to just chill. You don't know how to just be here and like be of value to other people. So the moment people can't go to their jobs, the moment they can't go to the I was gonna say cinema. I don't know why I was gonna say that. Movie theaters. Like, who says that?
From the
cinema.
1940s?
Right?
That's common. That's common.
I was gonna say Cinnabon. Okay. No. You
Shit.
can't go to the mall. You can't go to the, like, what are the other examples? You can't go to sporting events. You can't even go to picnics right now. It's July 4th weekend.
Yeah.
Is it July 4th today? Today's July 4th, right?
Yeah.
See, it's like, does it feel like July 4th? I mean, for the guys who are in America here, I know.
No.
Kind of.
It's like
did you see a parade down your street like you normally would?
I just heard a bunch of fireworks last night. But
That's about it. That was the only indicator that it was 4th of July.
Yeah.
You know, with the exception of going on social media, people are talking about 4th of July and stuff. But, you know, you're not doing like when I was a kid, we'd go to the neighborhood pool and there'd be like hot dogs and, you know, patriotic music and shit or whatever. And I'm not saying that all that stuff is inherently valuable or not. I'm just saying those are all the things we would do to sort of, oh yeah, okay, cool, I'm feeling good again. Now back to work. You know what I mean? Now it's like
Right.
You don't even have the job to focus on for most people. The unemployment's going, you know, crazy. So all these things are taken away. And it's like, what's the purpose of life? Like, what am I doing here? Why, you know, you can't pursue happiness. Like, if the point of life was to pursue happiness, then if you couldn't work and you had to stay home and you couldn't do any of these things, wouldn't you just sit and be like, well, okay, just be happy? You could try to artificially do that. People do that through like meditation and stuff like that, but it doesn't really work, does it? You know, it doesn't really work.
no.
People.
What
would argue for it,
I
though.
see when people are saying, oh, they're enlightened or whatever, right? Like, you know, these monks, right, that meditate for like their whole life, right, in a cave. Is like, what I actually see is a image of a little kid in the corner or like in their closet or something with their fingers in their ears going la 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 la, like trying to cover up like all the suffering and all the shit that they don't want to experience. They don't know what to do anything about, you know? So to circle back to your original question was, to me, all the stuff happening right now is like, yeah, of course all this is going to happen at some point. I really didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Like, that surprised me. Like, oh damn, whoa, now it's like suddenly we went from just, you can walk down the street, you can pretty much do whatever you want in America, to I literally, in Texas, which is considered like the freest state in the country by many people's opinions, like I can't just go into a grocery store without wearing a mask. You know what I mean? I can't just go and kind of do whatever I want in the same way that I could before. So that's a pretty radical shift, actually. It may not seem like a lot, but it's a pretty radical shift. So does that make sense what I mean? Like, I could see all these things coming. They're obvious to me because nobody's actually within themselves focused on how do we create a world that's best for everybody. They're just focused on themselves, and they're using all these little points in reality to define themselves by, to kind of keep their idea of themselves intact. You know, like last night, Drake, we were kind of texting back and forth last night at like, I don't know what time it was your time.
It's too late, bro.
It was like 2 a.m. or something. And I'm like texting him articles on like Foucault and Derrida and like Hegel and like just like some of this like abstract philosophy shit, right?
Yeah.
But it was cool. I was looking at it and seeing like how, the reason I was looking at it is because there's like right now these movements like Black Lives Matter, for example, like a lot of the trans and feminism and a lot of these movements that are becoming very obvious right now, kind of like in everybody's mind right now on social media and everything. They're based on these certain sort of set of philosophers in this, what we call the postmodern era. So I was really going into all of that, and then also looking at what those philosophers are based on and so forth. And I read some of this stuff before, but I was kind of just something, you know, you go on Wikipedia and you start clicking and you start clicking and
You were researching.
way out, you know. But it was really cool to see like how even these philosophers, a lot of things I'm saying right now, if you go read that philosophy, you're like, oh yeah, that's what those guys are saying. They're saying this. They're saying we're defining ourselves by these things, and it's creating conflict within us because we don't know who we are and all this stuff. So all the stuff that we're seeing is based on the acceptance of these ideas that I'm saying. Even if you just throw out the window all the stuff that we're bringing to the table, like destiny and all that stuff, if you just look at it in the mainstream, like philosophy and so forth, this is the things that we're accepting and then that we're living out and so forth in reality. The philosophers are just really good at describing what they see as symptoms. They don't have solutions though. And that's what you see. Their solutions will always be limited because they're not being fully self-honest. And what's even more interesting is I don't know if I sent you this one, Drake. It was it was like a feminist author. Her name was like Judith something or other. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But she had written a book in 2005 called something about the self. I can't, or making an account of oneself or something, like giving an account of oneself or something like that. But it was really interesting because she made it was, you know, I was just reading the Wikipedia because I was looking at a bunch of different stuff, but it was making this point that I want to read it to you guys real quick because this is like really fascinating.
Okay. As you're picking that out, I just want to say, as I was going through these philosophers, I was like, dude, the average person cannot understand this shit. Like even just the Wikipedia page, the average person is reading this and they're like,
What do you mean, Drake? Because it's like talking about self and people don't even necessarily know what self even means.
even beyond that, like it's talking about self, but then it's talking about how the idea of unity is just a negation of diversity, as in the starting point.
Hold on. Okay, here's a good example. So I'm going to read it. Anybody listening is probably going to be like, you
You
know,
want to share the screen?
which is fine.
Is that okay?
I'll
Drake, can you enable that?
Okay, sure. Hang on. It's
We
enabled.
will make this extensively practical.
yeah, but also, you know, you can just go on Wikipedia and look up Judith Butler if you want to like.
Are you
read out
crazy? What if I'm driving in my car right now, Cameron?
You want me to share it? Hold
Well,
on.
that's why Cameron's going to talk about it.
Okay, here we go. So yeah, but I just want to make a cool point. So it says here is this book she wrote. Check this out. Because at first when I read it, I'm like, what? So you have to read the whole thing and then it starts to make sense. But also drawing on what we know, it says in giving an account of oneself, Butler develops an ethics based on the opacity of the subject to itself. In other words, the limits of self-knowledge. Okay, so I don't know if that makes sense yet.
What's opacity in this context?
Well, like, what does opacity mean? Like, if you
Like,
have like a bottle,
can't
like a
It's
molded
opaque,
stuff,
right?
you
It's opaque,
can't see
yeah.
through it, right?
Yeah.
So the self is opaque. Okay. Well, I'll come back to it. Butler accepts the claim that if the subject is opaque to itself, the limitations of its free ethical responsibility and obligations are due to the limits of narrative presuppositions of language and projection. Okay. So I'm going to skip here because there's like a long quote. Instead, she argues for an ethics. So I gave a quote and then they're giving a contrast. Instead, she argues for an ethics based precisely on the limits of self-knowledge as the limits of responsibility itself. This is interesting. Any concept of responsibility which demands the full transparency of the self to itself. Okay, don't read any further. What is that saying? Any concept of responsibility that demands full transparency of the self to itself.
Being self-honest.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Being self-honest. So let's just replace it for a moment. Any concept of responsibility that demands self-honesty necessarily does violence to the opacity which marks the constitution of the self it addresses.
So basically, don't be honest with yourself, otherwise somehow that's violent.
Okay, hold on. Yes, good, right? Okay. The ethics that Butler envisions is therefore one in which the responsible self knows the limits of its knowing, recognizes the limits of its capacity to give an account of itself to others, and respects those limits as symptomatically human. Where have we heard this before? Well, I mean, you can't do what's best because you're always going to have people who are,
Excuses,
corrupt or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
justification.
To take seriously one's opacity to oneself and ethical deliberation means to critically interrogate the social world in which one comes to be human in the first place, and which remains precisely that which one cannot know about oneself. So what's really fascinating about this is it's like, this is why you see now in the world, they just want to change all the language. Because they're like, the reason why I feel the way I feel is not because of I need to go honestly within myself and look at what's my starting point for why I'm living. Am I living for the pursuit of energy, right? Like you wanted to talk about that a little bit, Drake, right? Maybe we can get into that. Yeah. But we can talk about pursuit of happiness. Same thing. Am I just here to try and feel good all the time, or am I here to look at the context of reality and do what's best given the context I'm in? That would be how I would look at my purpose here. But what this is suggesting is that, which is what kind of all the stuff that we're seeing in the world, like these protests and everything, all this stuff, well, this is what it's based on, is these types of theories, is saying, no, you don't really know who you are. You can never know who you are because you're like a black box. You're like a closed box. You can't see within yourself. All you can do is question the narratives, question the language, because that's what's causing all of the problems. It's the fact that we say manhole cover instead of person hole cover, which is like weird, right? You know what I mean? Or it's like we're calling it. I saw this list from Twitter for the engineering. It was like Twitter engineering talking about their adjustments in the way they speak in their engineering department, like their software development. They don't use the term. They don't want to use the term blacklisting a website. They don't want to use the term whitelisting. They want to call it, instead of blacklisting, they want to call it deny listing.
Deny
right?
listing.
But what happens when you get to the point of, like, let me ask you a question. Why is why is it bad to say blacklisting?
Because they're thinking from the perspective of, you're implying that black is bad.
Okay, so Drake is black, right?
Yeah.
Are you actually black?
No.
Like I would describe you more like kind of a little coffee color. Okay.
I think I'm
like
more
like
chocolatey color.
Like sort of a very light milk chocolate. Right?
Yeah, he's definitely lighter than coffee.
Chocolate coffee.
Right? We're like all four of us in this conversation. I mean, maybe it's the lighting, but we're all like very different shades of some kind of flesh tone, right?
Yeah.
So when we say black, how does that word itself apply to a human being?
It doesn't actually mean black. It just means
very
brown.
few people who are actually, like, you could say literally black in color.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you could technically say that because they're probably some shade of brown or something, right?
Yeah.
So, but the problem they're saying is that we're saying blacklisting. Therefore, black means negative. And also these people we're calling them black. So we need to stop saying blacklisting. And that way there will be racial equality. And these people won't grow up feeling bad and having low self-esteem about themselves and et cetera, et cetera.
Why don't we just stop?
This is their way of correcting
black?
Past injustice.
Yeah.
Do you see that? This is their way of correcting the fact that the claim, which to a certain degree makes sense, perhaps to a large degree, that people who, like, let's say people who are black, African-American, whatever you want to call that, are at a certain level of disadvantage due to years of racism and slavery, and then laws that didn't allow them to have the same access to capital and so forth. And that has created a situation where they're now in a situation where it's very hard for them to participate in the economy in the same way as other people who because of their skin color didn't have that same level of treatment and so forth. Okay. So whether you argue with that, because there's people who argue that, there's people who say that's not true, and there's levels in between and so forth. How is changing the fact that in Twitter we say that Twitter engineers don't say blacklisting going to affect any of that?
It's not.
It's not. But can you see, based on what we were reading earlier, isn't that what it was saying? Is that it's the narrative, it's the language, it's the projections based on that that's creating a person's identity. That's really what you have to target, because you can't change anything in here. And so what we're suggesting with self-perfection is it's like the contrast to everything else that we're seeing. But what's really cool is, do you remember we were talking about that term negative capability, Drake?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like everybody thinks, to a certain degree perhaps, that you either have to go along with everything or you have to rebel.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree we're not just going along with things?
Mm-hmm.
Would you also agree we're not just rebelling?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You see the difference? So what we're seeing right now is people just rebelling and trying to like change the language and all this stuff. Well, what we're saying is, look, take self-responsibility. Here's the tools to do it. You don't need anybody else. You have the tools. Here they are. And they're on the website under the free resources. You can go look at that stuff, right? So here's the tools. Here's what we're applying. Here's what we're realizing. We're not special. We don't feel like we're better than anyone else. We just want other people to be able to take self-responsibility for themselves, because the reason why you might feel like you're opaque to yourself is just like you were saying earlier, Mitch, right? The reason I brought up the point about, I pushed back on the point of ignorant and lazy is because most people will take that as a self-judgment and not go any further. You know, like, have you ever been in a situation where it's like, you know, something's not going right in whatever the context is of whatever you're doing, and you start feeling bad about it? Like, let's say you're in a business, something's not working, you're not making the money you wanted, and you're like, oh, why isn't this working? Right? That is self-judgment. Because then you start going into this victimization mindset of like, oh, why can't it just work for me? Da, da, da. And it's like, who says it's supposed to work for you? Like, did you just believe your life is supposed to work out just magically? Like, maybe you have an opportunity to create something that's very difficult and it's not supposed to work out. You have to make it work. And then it's like, oh, why am I treating myself as a victim in this situation? Okay, this thing isn't working out. How can I solve this problem? You see, like, your mindset changes. So right now, what you see in the world on pretty much all sides is like, we're all victims to this world, which is, in essence, isn't that what that statement from Judith Butler was saying? It's like, you're a victim to the society and the narratives and all this stuff. There's no self-responsibility at all. And you can't even know yourself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ironic that you guys chose the topic. I think it was somebody, I don't know who chose the point about self-honesty, but whatever the point is, that this is really, I think, the core point of what we're facing in this world. And it's on the principles, right? Is it like principle 2 or 3? I think it's 2.
Yeah, it's 2. It's 2.
2, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 2. Right? So it's the second principle on there for a reason. You have best for all as the first principle, because that has to be the starting point for you to even understand what you're trying to be honest about, right? But what's just really cool, because this philosophy that we're seeing is creating a mindset within people. Now, wouldn't you guys agree with me? How many people you think have actually read any of the stuff that we were just reading?
Oh,
I didn't.
It's got to be like a very small percentage of people. And even the people who are reading it, I'm sure, don't even really understand it, most of them.
Right.
And of the
And
things that
yet-
you were sending, that was like the easiest read.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But can't you also see how just the way we're explaining it, it's influencing the world?
Yeah.
The fact that someone came up with this philosophy and put it out there and other people are reading it, it is now influencing things. And it's really just maybe just describing things. You could even look at it like that. It's just describing what you're seeing. Right.
That's like also, you know, we talk about Edward Bernays, how, you know, he's written or had a philosophy that not many people have heard about, but it's definitely influenced the world in major, major ways, you know?
Yeah. The Century of the Self is like a fantastic documentary. If you haven't watched it, you can look it up. I think it's Adam Curtis. I think is the name of the guy.
Yeah, it's on
Put it
YouTube. It's like 4 parts.
It's great. I watched that in 2005, I think. I want to say like somewhere around there, 2005, 2007. And it made sense, but it made a lot more sense later as I kind of studied more and everything. But that one is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So what do you guys see? What do you want to take it from here? Because
Well,
we want to make it practical, right?
Yeah. So if someone's at the point where they're like, well, can I even really know myself? Like, because I remember when I used to be so confused. I used to be so freaking lost when it came to like, is there even one objective truth? Is truth even real? Do I just create my own reality? Is reality even here? Am I actually somewhere else, like the Matrix or something? And this is like my body, but I'm actually in some other dimension. Like, I used to be so messed up. And then the way that y'all would show me, like, no, you're here. Like, if you're really honest with yourself, you realize you're here. It's your mind is messing with you. So
Yeah.
I think that could be really helpful to really ground this of, imagine for me, I'm just imagining I'm talking to myself about 2 years ago to explain to myself, self-honesty will really support you to actually, like, I have happiness now. Really, for the first time in my life, I actually have genuine happiness. because I'm not
Isn't that
chasing
fascinating?
the
When you
weekend.
stop chasing it.
Yeah, I'm not chasing the weekend or the vacation or this or that or whatever. I'm just able to be here more and more.
Are those things the source of your happiness?
Or what? The vacation?
The weekends, yeah.
No.
What is the source from your perspective now? What is the source of your happiness now? Why is it that you feel good?
Well, it's because I actually realize that I do have power, and I've seen the impact that that's had on other people. And I see how I've been there to support others. Others have been there to support me. So we have really cool give and take relationship. So now I actually know that I am interconnected. Basically, I matter, and other people matter too. And I actually know that at a fundamental level. It's not like, oh, I matter, I'm special, give me a sticker. It's like, no, I actually, through my participation,
Having an influence.
through my decisions, yeah, I can influence the world. And I do influence the world. And then vice versa. And then you see that ripple effect where I have some conversation and support someone else. Then they share it with another, and they share it with another. Then we have this group, and Self-Perfected's growing, and people are on the hangout, and they're living the principles, and they're experiencing happiness for the first time in their life. It's like, wow,
Okay.
let's keep expanding this.
2 things on that. One, you're the source of your own happiness now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Not
Which doesn't
pursuing
mean
it.
you can do it all on your own. Like if there was no trees, you'd have no oxygen, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean you're making it in a bubble. But my point is that happiness is coming from you as a result of what you're doing, right? But
Mhm.
2, what you're describing could be interpreted by somebody who is just trying to pursue happiness to say, oh, I just need to go and create a group like you guys have and create a group and like, you know, tell people about whatever I think is important and just have my own sense of purpose and all that. Is that going to work?
No.
Is it about joining Self-Perfected? Because I want to be clear, it's not about you have to be in part of Self-Perfected, but there
You should
is
be.
something that, okay, yeah, well, you should. But what I mean is, is that what it's about? What is it about that you accepted that you're living from rather than the fact that you've done all these things? Because it's not the effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why
well,
is it that you're getting that instead of it just being like, I created a group and now I'm happy?
Yeah.
It's not the group that's making you happy.
No, it's because I have now actually realized what it means to live from the starting point of doing what's best for all. So it's not just me, because before it was self-interest, and it was like, I'm just going to do my thing, you know, whatever happens, happens. But I was creating consequences, and I wasn't even scratching the surface of what's possible. But now it's, as I'm with another person or here on this podcast, I can be present and I can actually focus on giving. I'm not here to try and take from you guys. I'm not here to try and get something out of this. It's like we have a group of people who are all aligned with, let's do what's actually best for everybody. And then we can give to each other, and it becomes this economy in a sense of giving, receiving. And then it's like we all come together and this bigger thing emerges because we're all stable points within it.
Okay.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
Because I also feel like genuine happiness now as well. And it's something that, you know, I've spoken about this before where I didn't know I was going to get that from TechnoTutor. You know, I didn't know that from this group or from like my interactions with you guys that I was going to experience like this blissfulness, you know, where I saw what I was doing when I was first communicating with you, Cameron, was just, all right, let me just get my business in order, my finances in order. Let me just get, you know, just that. If I could just do that, then, you know, I can go and be happy. Right. But what I actually found was really knowing myself. And that's pretty much the point that you brought up, right, Mitch? Like just really finding out that all these thoughts that I had of, they were just like self-defeating thoughts that I just thought was me. That's just like, this is life. I was that person who was like, I am a victim of life, you know, and not to blame anyone in particular. That's just, life is hard and this is what it is. And, you know, I don't know if I'll ever make it out of like this feeling. This is just who I am, you know? And
See, that's the opacity of self, isn't it?
it is.
They're
It
saying
is.
accept,
Yeah. Don't accept
See?
that. Don't accept that.
accept it and then try to change the world around you.
No, that's bullshit. Don't do that, because you can drop all of that. And by drop all of that, I don't mean like just ignore it and just like, oh, I'm happy and all this, and like, okay, I dropped it. That's not how that works.
Not going to work. Yeah.
It's not going to work that way. And it's funny because a lot of people, they like a lot of, especially spiritual people, they think in that way of just like, you tell them, okay, you just have to let that go. Okay, I let it go. It's like, all right, you didn't actually let it go. You just said the words.
If
And
you didn't actually change immediately in that moment.
Yeah,
you
I mean,
actually let it go.
maybe
If you're just still holding on to whatever, it's not changed.
yeah. And so
But that's where the self-honesty comes in too, isn't it?
that is where the self-honesty comes in, because you actually do the actual investigation, the research within yourself, the actual understanding to, okay, what am I actually saying? Why am I thinking this way? How did I get to this point? All of that is just so important as far as knowing yourself. And then when you know yourself, then you can make really clear decisions within yourself of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for yourself. And that, setting those boundaries or principles or however you want to call them, as far as what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And in order to do that, I would say you have to have a purpose. You have to have a direction that you're heading, right? And what adds to that direction and what takes away from that, you have to be aware of that. You have to be able to understand that, process that information, and then understand and process the information of what's going on within you, because nobody else can really do that for you. But I mean, that's what we're talking about when we're sharing these tools, is like improving your ability to understand and process that information for yourself, so that you can then get to the point of, oh, you know what? All this other shit that I was holding on to, all these thoughts, all these feelings, all that, I can let go of that. I can drop all of that. And then when you do, it's just like, for me, naturally, I just started feeling better because, okay, I'm not holding on to all of that. And then now even more so, I'm understanding more and more and more. And I'm realizing, like Mitch said, my ability to actually influence and change things, because I can see, oh, this just makes sense. It's not like a thing anymore where it's like, one day I'm just gonna do a thing. And like I had a dream like that, where it's just like, one day I'll just wake up and it'll all just fucking work or something. I don't know. But now I can see like the actual steps of like, oh, this is gonna take a while, but I just have to do this, and then talk to this person and talk to this person, talk to that person. And I don't care if all of them say no, I'm going to keep fucking talking, because it just makes sense of the steps that I'm taking now. It's really clear. It's really obvious to me now. And it's like, it's really freeing too, to know what all the responsibilities are in a weird way. You know
it's
what I mean?
Fun too.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like a game. It's not a game because it's real and it's like serious work that we're doing.
Yeah.
But it is like a game, because it's like you wake up and you know what you need to do, and then you apply yourself. But it's not like a video game where you're isolated in your own little bubble.
Look at the shift. Okay, this is really the core point of what we were talking about, even the beginning of our episode today, is the shift from I'm here to take, okay, which is based in what?
Self-interest.
Fear.
Yeah. Oh, fear.
Which is fear, yes.
Yeah.
But self-interest, but which is fear.
Yeah.
The self-interest is just
it's fear
words that
in
we
what way?
justify.
I think
Fear
I see
of
what you're
loss.
saying, but so
Fear
you're
of-
taking because
fear
you
of-
fear. Mm-hmm.
Because
It's like,
we know if we don't have money, we know this at a deep level. What do we know is going to happen?
I'm going to die.
So we are all always in constant fear. That is the source of our anxiety, existentially. That's why we're pursuing happiness. When you shift that and you say, okay, I'm certain about how to make a difference in this world. That would be best for everybody. It would be best for me. It would be best for everybody else. I'm certain about it. I know what I need to do. I may not know the steps ABC, but I understand the principle through which I'm operating. So when I get to a part I don't fully understand, I can navigate it because I can bring it back to, okay, well, what's my principle here? So then I can look at the situation and see what would be the best outcome because I know the starting point rather than just, well, it fits into my little preconceived idea of what I wanted it to be. So now we're living more and more from that point of, I'm just here to go into reality and influence it and give what I'm able to do. And part of that giving is building my skills up even more, building up my persuasion ability, building up my sales ability, building up all of those points. Like your ability to connect with people and all of those things, that's a part of your giving. And you're doing it in a way to improve the world. And it's not just a giving where you feel good about it and then you hope that it did something. It's a point where you're clearly walking this process, you've shifted your starting point, and the result of that is, let me ask you guys, don't you feel a lot less afraid? So that feeling you're experiencing of feeling good, and that, what if you want to call it bliss, whatever you want to call it, is just the absence of fear. So it's only going to grow as you remove fear. But the more a person chooses to try to pursue the happiness, you see, you can't do that because it's still accepting the starting point of, I'm afraid. So you stop being afraid. How do you stop being afraid? By adopting a set of principles that no matter what, if they're applied, the result will be best. So what could you possibly be afraid of? You see, that is what we call common sense. It takes self-honesty to do that, right? What's your perspective, Asif? Because I know you've walked a process, you've had experiences where it's like you had to kind of make that choice of like, the acting was one of those points. But I think also when you went to Australia, that was probably another point where it was like, what am I really here to do? And it seemed to me like that was the final kind of point where you were like, all right, I need to really focus on this. But what do you think?
It wasn't on a podcast. It was the behind closed doors talk when we were talking about the furthest extent of the biggest picture. And it's going to require, in terms of, it's not about rebelling or just accepting everything. It's about going through the system in order to change the system. And part of that is getting very rich so that you have influence, so that you can manipulate the systems in a way that's best for all. And we were talking about our starting point and how that creates the future. And there will come a point in time where the ultimate test will be, okay, now we have everything. We can influence the system to be exactly what it needs to be in order to make this world like the best, or that will bring about or be the foundation for the world to become the best. And it's going to require us to let go. It's going to require us to give up everything that we've accumulated. And it's like, I faced the micro point of that in Australia, where I was like, here's the beautiful weather, the beautiful women, and I
could just kept going with it.
Freedom, and yeah. And I was like, oh God. And so the point was, because
it's actually really cool, man. Because it's like, if you could give that up, you trust yourself. That's really cool.
And same thing for Kian. I know he's not here right now, but it was like a literal death inside of him. It's probably the most shook up he's ever been when we both made the decision of, okay, we have to put this aside and do what we've seen to be the best thing that we could be doing with our life, which is spreading the solution to the internal crisis going on inside of everybody. Or I could just stay in Australia and make a bunch of money. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, which one's way easier? Like, I went from making, $30K to making zero. I was like, okay, leave that, like restart, and going back to the point of adopting the reason we would adopt a belief that we weren't willing to research, or we accepted it because whatever reason, it's a belief, something that we heard that we're like, okay, yeah, I like that, rather than really going through the logic process of questioning that and looking for contra evidence and all these things, is because we're doing it to cover up a fear, right? And the last podcast is, talking about God. And it's a huge point because the biggest fear that we're trying to cover up is our fear of what the fuck happens when we die.
Yeah.
So we adopt this belief system. Whether you're atheist or believe in God, it doesn't matter. You're adopting it. When I die, I'm going to go somewhere else, so this doesn't matter. Or when I die, nothing, I just disappear, and so this doesn't matter. Like, either way, it's the same thing.
I get off scot-free.
Yes. But it's like, what's way scarier and what just makes most sense? We're not going to some different reality. is that just in the same way that today I'm experiencing the consequences to everything I've done in my life so far, it's like when you die, pretend, let's go with the assumption that you just experience the consequences to how you've lived your life. And that's what we're doing as a collective, as humanity, right?
Or to even clarify that a little bit further, not necessarily only how you've lived your life, but who you are.
Go a little bit more specific into that.
Meaning, I'm clarifying it because it's like, and I know you're not suggesting this, but I think somebody could interpret that to mean
this is
like,
important. Yeah.
You're going to pay for something you did in this life, like, like karma or something like that. And that's not what you're suggesting. I know that's not what you're suggesting. It's more the point of, and even like when you said, what you're experiencing right now is the consequence of everything you've done in your life, even in this life. It's true, but not really. It's because if you're insulated by money, then you're not really.
And there's also systems that were already in place.
Right. That's what I mean. But but at a certain level, you're still accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it comes down to. So who would you have to be to accept it and not want to do anything about it, not change it, not stand up, not do whatever little tiny thing, even if it was tiny, you could do before you die to make a stand within yourself that I'm not accepting this. I'm going to change it. I'm going to take some level, as much responsibility as I possibly practically physically can until I literally can't anymore. And then when you die, whatever reality you find yourself in, then you would do the same thing. Like, okay, now I'm over here and maybe it has nothing to do with the reality I was just in, but I would, if you were in this current reality, a person who was just accepting, oh, there's a lot of people who don't have anything and some people who do, and I'm just here to feel happy. Like, think of that character of that person. If you were looking at them objectively, you'd be like, man, that person doesn't give a fuck about anything. And if you were God, whatever you want to call it, and you were like, okay, I'm going to have this person come to my new reality where there's even less rules, and like you can just manifest whatever you want or whatever it is. Like, if it's more like what you would think heaven would be, you're going to want that person there? The person that was totally okay with like this totally abusive world that we have, and they're just there to feel good. So they're literally doing the same thing that everyone's doing and not doing a thing about it. And fundamentally, even if you're in a position in this world where you can't do something about the system, and maybe there's people that are in that situation. I'm thinking that if you're listening to this podcast, you could probably do more than just focus on yourself. And I also see that having this larger goal of pushing yourself to make a difference measurably in the outside world, like going into politics, whatever the particular point is that you do, will support you to also do the interchange. Because to do that, you're going to have to go outside of your comfort zone. You're going to have to face the limits of what you've accepted about yourself, which is presenting to you perfectly the points that are like, oh, this is what I need to change. This is the thing I'm accepting that's preventing me from having more responsibility. And the worst case scenario is the end result of all of that is you've really questioned who you are. And you're like, I'm not accepting that anymore. Maybe you never had a result. Maybe, I'm saying maybe you never got far enough to get into politics. You got hit by a bus 3 weeks from now or something. You know what I mean? Like, okay, but you challenge the point within yourself about who am I and am I going to accept this anymore? You started that point, right? And so when you get to another context of reality, that's different rules or whatever, you don't know what it's going to be. You would trust yourself to continue questioning things and accept and actually looking at what can I do here to make this place better for everybody and myself, regardless of where you're at. And how many people think of death and the afterlife or what happens when you're dead or whatever in those terms? I don't think anyone else does. No. And I don't mean anyone else other than me. I mean anyone else that's not considering these principles, because you have to start with the starting point of what's best for all to even get to that conclusion. To even have that as a result of your logic, the starting point has to be best for all is ultimately what's important. And remember, that includes what's best for you. Because the reality that you're going to go into, whether it's this one or the next one or whatever, is going to be in some level the result of who you are, because you're going to participate in that reality. So your effect in the reality is going to be defined by who you are and what you're looking for and what you're searching for and what you care about and what you value. So if you're not changing that here, when you know you have the opportunity to do it, what happens if you get to the next world or life or reality or whatever, if it exists, and you realize, fuck, it's harder to change it now.
Yeah.
I would
It's
say
like-
that would be a tragedy, right?
Yeah, it's like everybody always says, they want. Yeah, I want what's best for everyone, sure. Or I
No,
want.
no, hold on. I want what's best.
Yeah,
I
That's
wish.
different
yeah.
than saying I'm
I
willing
wish
to
this-
give it. I'm willing
exactly,
to make it happen.
exactly.
right?
That's the same.
If
thing.
I had one wish, it would be for World.
Yeah, if I could just ask a genie to do it,
If I could
it's
just snap my fingers.
yeah,
Well, no shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you play the lottery. Okay.
exactly. And so like everyone says, I want, a world where, it's the golden rule, you do unto others as you want done unto you. But then what I always say is just, okay, prove it. Like fucking prove it.
Ooh.
Like that's where we're at right now. That's what we're talking about is we are proving it within our actions and the way that we live our life. And that's going to create more and more of that within ourselves, more and more of us actually showing that we value life. And so, yeah, like you're saying, to your point, wherever we go next, that's who we are. But, for the vast majority of people right now, that is not who they are. It's an idea that they have in their head, but it's not who they are. Who they are is who they're allowing themselves to be, as far as like what they do from their day to day, where they don't actually give a fuck about, that person over there or anybody outside of themselves, really.
I
But then also
remember-
not questioning the system that exists that's making it very difficult to give a fuck.
Yeah.
Not about
Yeah.
judging anybody, because I know somebody might react and be like, well, you guys just sound like you're judging people who aren't doing what you're doing and so forth. And it's like, no, it's not about judgment. We're saying here's the tools to become self-honest so you can figure out for yourself, where are the points that you're accepting.
Yeah.
And then within that, the solution has to be also, what are the points in this world that are making it very difficult for us to be honest with ourselves, to give as we want to receive? The solution isn't just, well, I want to do what's best, so I'm going to start giving to the homeless people. It's like, you didn't go far enough. Because if you're not coming to the conclusion that we need to change things politically, like we need to go into politics, or we need to support people to do this. Like when I say we, I just mean, let's say you're somebody who, we don't need everybody to do it. We don't need everybody to become a politician. If everybody was a politician, well, what would that even mean? That doesn't make sense.
But don't
wouldn't
use
get
that as an
anything down.
excuse.
Yeah.
If you
But don't
have-
use
if
it
you're
as an
afraid-
excuse.
you know, oh yeah, they'll just do it. I'll be good chilling here. It's like, no, come on.
But my point is, you don't know maybe right now how far you can go, and what you think is possible is just the limits of what you know right now, because you haven't used the tools that we're talking about. You don't really know what's possible in terms of your limits. So for now, you could start with the starting point of, well, I'm not sure if politics or something like that is for me, if I'm going to do that, but I do need to question myself. I do need to be a part of, if that person's going into politics, they're going to expect me to vote for what they're saying. So I need to understand it. I need to be able to see if someone's proposing something and saying, like you said earlier, you can just say it's best for all. We're not just wanting people to say, yes, I support what's best for all. Because two different people can say that. There can't be two different bests for all. Best for alls? Yeah. There can't be two bests for all.
Yeah.
There's only one. You see what I mean? Like in a given situation, if this person doesn't have clean water and this person doesn't have clean water, and there's clean water to be distributed, there's only one way to do it in which both get what they need.
Right.
And if there's a second way, it's a minor technical detail.
Like some kind of optimization. We get the water.
But then
there
even
faster.
then you could probably look at, well, which one is actually best? Like just a matter of
Yeah,
self-honesty and also having the vocabulary to understand that problem fully. Sometimes it may seem like there's a lot of options that are best because you just don't really understand what the best one is. And maybe you think something's best, you try it out, it doesn't work the way you want, and you're like, that was an error. Okay, now I can inform myself so next time my decision is better. So we may not be able to right this moment always see what's best, but then we're going to learn from that feedback. And the self-honesty is, okay, if the feedback is this wasn't best, and the reason I chose it though was because I was biased in some way, well, what was causing that bias? It's this belief, this feeling, whatever. What's more important? What's best in that result, or my feeling, my bias, whatever? So then you have to make a choice. Which one is important to you? So
Yeah.
this is where we talk about transcending rather than resisting, you know, rather than just going along or resisting, having that false dichotomy. It's about transcending. It's about saying, okay, I can actually change myself. No one else can do that for you. If someone else were to do that for you, that literally just means you're a robot. If you want to go to heaven and then everything is made perfect for you, no matter what you do or who you are. I mean, what is that saying about what you want to be treated as?
Yeah.
Just like a robot or some insignificant thing that has no effect upon reality whatsoever. Right. So that's really, in a lot of sense, what we're here to do is to decide who is it that we're going to accept ourselves to be. And the world will be a consequence of that.
So the beliefs that we accept are always going to be based off the fear of just fear, some kind of fear of loss. And it's really, if you don't know how to remove those points or really look at what your fears are, you're not going to be able to start questioning your beliefs, because the cognitive dissonance that comes up when you're like, oh shit, like what I believed wasn't true, it's going to be too much for you. I know, Cameron, you're somebody who's like, oh, I'll dive right into that shit. I don't care. Even Mitchell, you'd cycle through that so quickly, right? But for a lot of people, okay, well, if we just look at it physiologically, we developed all these coping mechanisms in order to protect ourselves, because things would hurt us and we'd be like, ah.
What's an example?
So then for example, one time you ran into the room and you're like, mom, check this out. And she was like, shh, don't yell. And I'm like, oh shit, like I'm never supposed to, like, okay. So I gotta like be quiet and like whatever it is. And we made a decision there, right? Where we put this layer on top of what we really want to look at and express ourselves. And now there's like this layer of protection, right? Mm-hmm. And then now, if there's somebody in your environment, it's like, Mitchell, you're like, dude, like just quiet down, please. Like you're being loud. So then you start imposing that on other people, right? And don't get me wrong, there's contexts where, whatever, but it's being able to explain that, where really we just make decisions unconsciously of like, okay, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect ourselves. And because of that, what happens in our brain is it crystallizes. Well, after age 7, after age 10, you stop caring what people are saying about trying to explain things, and it just like bounces off your brain. Where a lot of people listening to this are probably like, okay, this is cool stuff, but it's like kind of like, oh, okay, not bad, but they're not actually going to change anything they do. It's a byproduct of a physiological effect, is our brain is just like set in place. Where Drake, I don't remember, I think it was on one of these podcasts, but you're talking about when you started using TechnoTutor, it's like the page was speaking to you and all this stuff. It's like you were ready to start like going deeper. It's like, that's the results of reopening the liquidity of your brain, or the natural learning ability, right? So going back to, it seems like you guys are just you guys are just arrogant. You guys think that what you're doing is you're questioning things more than other. Dude.
Now, how do we know people are thinking that? Because that's what people say.
People have said that to us.
We're not just like,
Yeah. And I used to think that about you guys and vice versa, right?
Exactly.
Because when I started this, when I was 16, 17, I 100%, I was reading Abraham Hicks, I was reading this, that, and I was like, yeah, life, like, you need to have contrast in life. The law of polarity, duality is good and evil. They always have to exist. And that's why kids starve in the world. So I don't have to worry about it. It was something that I accepted, and I said, that makes sense. And I moved forward.
Have you seen that video, The Biggest Missing Piece by Abraham Hicks?
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'll send it to you later. It literally, someone at a Abraham Hicks seminar brings that point up, and it's like, but what about like children starving and like, I don't know if he says being raped, but like something, really negative like that. And it was really fascinating the way they answer it, because they're basically just saying like, well, that's just your kind of vantage point and perspective, like, and everything is, by design. And what you have to realize is that that person in that situation is creating it through their blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
right.
So
And it's
I
like,
watched that
okay, so
back.
the child who literally has no one told them this, no one taught them how to think properly or anything in this severe situation, a third world country, they're the ones creating the poverty that they're in. Mm-hmm. Not you, the fat fuck, sitting on your couch eating McDonald's, that literally is extracting resources from these third world countries. Not you. You're not the cause of it. No. You're creating that situation where you're just lounging and gorging yourself on delicious greasy meats and stuff because your thoughts are so pure and like higher level vibration. Yeah, right. So if I'm in a reality, who do I want to be with? I want to be with that kid, the kid who's starving, because it's like, hey, this kid actually wants to change something. This other guy over here doesn't want to change anything. And Bernard Pullman had a really cool video. You can look it up. It's like, if you look up The Biggest Missing Piece, and then you look up Bernard Pullman, you'll find his response video to it.
Right.
And he explains all of this. It's so clear. It's like they're not considering how the system is interconnected and everything, and the fact that you're creating it just as much as that person is creating it, if not more, because you're arguing for the continuation of it.
Yeah.
You're arguing for it. You know, I was, you know, in that little weird Wikipedia rabbit hole we were doing the other night, Drake.
Yeah.
There was this concept called the limit experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if I sent you that.
Yeah, you did.
It's called the limit
Sent
experience,
me a
right?
lot of shit.
I say a lot of shit. There was this French philosopher. I don't know how to say his name. It was like Bataille, or I don't know, if you speak French, you probably know better. But he was talking. They were really focused on this concept, something called the limit experience, and it was the juxtaposition or they believe that you could, in a certain way, get to this experience of a limit experience where you're kind of shifted out of your reality. And so it's kind of like you're in a zone where it's like a transcendent experience. You know, some people might call it a peak experience or something like that if you're into self-development and all that. But they were specifically looking at it in the context of being something extremely negative, and that was the way you would experience this, a limit experience, like pushing to the limit of your perceived reality. So they would focus on things like horror and stuff like that. And there was this discussion about you know, that Chinese torture method where it's like death by 1,000 cuts.
Oh yeah.
And they would literally just cut little pieces of your flesh off, and like it's like a extreme torture. And they had this obsessive focus on it. And I was reading a comment on a YouTube video about this stuff, and somebody made this really cool point. They were like, you know, it's interesting because they're looking for this limit experience thing and thinking it's maybe in this really negative experience, but this is like some French philosopher who's probably sitting in a cafe, like writing and everything, fantasizing about, you know, some totally horrific experience that's going to get him to transcend the experience of reality. He's like, but what if you were to go ask the guy who's actually being cut like 1,000 times to death? Like, he would probably just be like, nah, man, this really fucking hurts. I really wish it would stop. Like, they're not like, oh, transcendence, you know, like, give me a break.
Yeah.
So it's literally an experience that literally somebody is going to have in reality because they're being tortured. They would use this torture for like heinous crimes in like ancient China or whatever it was. This is a real thing they did. And so over here you have a philosopher who's taking that concept and just playing with it in their mind and imagining something, not looking at the reality of it. Yeah. And so same thing, like with this Abraham Hicks, they're like, oh yeah, these kids are suffering and they're starving and all that. And you're not even considering the physical experience of your body eating itself alive because you're starving. And what that like, must really feel like.
I thought, because I heard it, is like they chose to be there. Like before they came to this earth, they chose to be there to teach, you know, to learn something. Right. And religion, I would ask my uncles and they'd say, you know, that's their test. But like, what if it was put
So it's like someone says that, like slap them in the face and be like, hold on, you chose that. You're like, really? How far do you want to take? That's the self-honesty, isn't it? Like, can you put it to the test?
Yeah.
So literally don't even have money. Just give up all your possessions. Just start walking in this world. And if everything doesn't come to you automatically without you having to even do anything, you chose that, right?
I remember.
So what's the lesson you're trying to learn there? That you need to make money, or that you need to accept just not having money? Which is
one of your Facebook videos. It was so funny. You're just like, and then somebody will say, you know, this. He's like, I had a friend come to me and say that, you know, we were talking. They're saying, yeah, but you just create your own reality. What the fuck were you doing for the last 20 years? And I remember laughing so hard because, okay, let's be honest. I was going to make it about a specific group of people, whatever, but most people just don't have what they want. Even us, like, we're not where we want to be.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we see how to get there. But when you just say, like, I create my own reality, you have to be in so much delusion, because I've heard it from people who just recently got divorced. I've heard it from people who just recently lost their job. I heard it from people who aren't making the money they want to make, don't have the relationship they want with their kids, et cetera, et cetera. Where it's like, okay, well, if you create your own reality, what the fuck are you doing?
Right? Let's tell me how you're doing that, so I don't do that.
But let's go into that for a moment, though.
Yeah.
So
how are we
without getting to like a personal name of a person or something? Because I'm sure you've had these real conversations with people. I've had this too. When does that come up? Because I know it's like, it's actually their way of handling an objection. It's like you're pushing them to a point of self-honesty so that they can actually start getting a result. But then it comes up as a way of justifying staying where they're at. So what is that point where a person could get to where they would then use that as the limiting point?
I want to go back to the theory part of it. Is like
Yeah.
the fundamental assumption that we just read from Judith Butler, the fundamental assumption with Buddha, Jordan Peterson, whatever, okay, is like, and the starting assumption that we interpret all information before we fundamentally work on our unconscious ability to change, right, is that we believe that we can't change. Where all information that we look at is either to fit it into what we're doing or discard it, right? And so in terms of what you're talking about, it always comes back to this point of like, we're saying, hey, we should focus on this thing because it'll make our life better. And I want to link it back to something that Avery said on the Thursday call, the Thursday TT call, and I would always think about this point of like, you know, that's why ignorance is bliss. Because if you just ignore everything that's going on, you can just focus on your self-interest. But then Avery said the statement, and I'm like, oh, of course. He's like, ignorance is not bliss. And it's true, because if you're just ignoring the problems in this world, it's equal to the way you ignore the problems in your life, because both of them are just trying to avoid negative experience. But because of that, it's like if you have a hole in your boat and you're like, I don't want to see that because I don't want to stress. It's like your boat's going to slowly sink and your feet are going to get wet,
You're not
et cetera,
going
et
to be
cetera.
in bliss, actually.
Yeah, like you're going to fuck yourself over. And this is why it matters of what Mitchell was talking about. He's like, now I actually experience happiness. It's when you let go of the desire to feel happiness, because in that desire to feel happy, or the want, the word want comes from the lack of.
Yeah.
So if you're wanting to be happy, it's just because you're sad. But if you don't, this is why the saying, I really started looking at the saying, the truth hurts. You guys, everybody's heard that, right? The truth hurts. It's like, if something is hurting you, there's probably some truth in it. Because if right now it feels like, Cameron, you're a woman, you'd be like, no, I'm not. It wouldn't hurt you because you know who you are. But if I'm like, Cameron, you should really like challenge this opinion that you have. And you're like, no, I define my life by this idea and I can't let go of it. It's like, then who the fuck are you? Because you shouldn't have an issue with letting go of that.
That's the self-honesty point, right?
Exactly. That's what it's coming back to. Is like what we were talking about earlier, of in terms of when that point comes up of like, it usually comes up in regards to me being like, okay, so consider all the stuff that's happening in this world or what's happening in your life. It kind of just becomes this thing of like, it's just something you live with. But when it's in the positive sense of like, how do we get what we want, or, you know, whatever the case may be, it's like, we're just kind of playing out a timeline that we're just following. We talked about this on the Self-Perfected call. But let me just be particular on this point. It's like, we got created by our environment, and we're just kind of playing out a timeline that's just basically us acting out the first 7 years of our life. We're acting out, half of us is our mom, half of us is our dad. That's just the truth. And so all the points where we're like, we might be thinking, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do better in this world. It's like, unless you are very specific in interjecting what you're playing out, you're just going to end up doing some bullshit that's not what you're saying. And when I challenge people on that, what they say is, you know, it's like, you create it here first, and then you just play it out. You create it here. Reality is subjective. You have to visualize it and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, but how long have you been doing that for? And it hasn't changed anything, right? And it's like they're saying, avoid looking at the negative stuff, because then you're just going to think negative and you're not going to be able to do anything. Yeah. It's like that's just telling me that you don't know how to handle when you're feeling negative. You don't know how to handle when you're feeling bad. And that's where the truth is, because the truth hurts, right?
The problem is in the person taking the concept of you create your reality, which is true. We are creating our reality in terms of how we experience the world together. But then thinking, to create a different reality, I don't need to change.
Yeah.
And thinking that if I just think different thoughts, the reality will change. But I'm not changing who I am. I'm not changing the starting point of anything I'm doing. So fundamentally, your reality is not going to change. And then especially when you consider how that context of that statement is always within, not always, but generally in terms of who we talk to, young men, young women who are like entrepreneur types who want to create like success according to what they think it is, not realizing that you were not meant to be
Set
successful
up
in this
or-
system. Yeah, like
Yeah.
the system says, okay, I need 1,000 billionaires right now.
Cool.
Okay.
We already have that.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, so this person wants to become a billionaire. Like, no, we don't need you here. Like, it's got to support you within it. If you're just staying within your pre-programming, if you're staying within what you already have accepted about yourself, if that was enough to be a billionaire in this system, you'd already be there, or it would happen naturally. There would be no resistance really to getting there. Like Elon Musk, like the guy goes and creates PayPal, all that stuff, gets rid of all of his stock, creates more companies, becomes a billionaire again. Like, you know what I mean? You just watch it happen. That's his programming. You see, like, you can't just change that through your conscious thinking. Like, that was his trajectory. And so it's not to say that we don't create reality, but at the same time, do we create the oxygen in the air? Like, in real time, are we creating the oxygen?
And if you didn't
Or is
believe
the
in
oxygen
then
here? You know what I
you
mean?
wouldn't
Like,
have it?
no, could I do something differently with the oxygen? Yeah. So there's a level where we can create within that, but it's just the delusion comes in when the person thinks literally you can just manifest something out of thin air, no effort required, it's totally contrary or contradictory to the current way reality operates, and it's just for you, and you're going to benefit from it, and you don't even have to understand the rules of how our society and our system is working or anything.
Well, yeah, because it works in your dreams and in your imagination. You see these beautiful pictures, and I'm the king of the whole kingdom in my dreams, and I have the hottest girlfriend. I have 10 girlfriends. They all love me.
Or
It's like,
boyfriends.
yeah, or boyfriends or whatever, and you are being fucked by your imagination.
Everybody does it. It was my point of making
Mhm.
that statement.
Mhm.
You know?
That's the biggest place where we have been screwed over by ourselves, by past generations. We're continuing to do it. We're screwing our children over, is in the imagination.
Mhm.
And this is why we're very specific with our kids. We don't
You're clear when you're distinguishing between something that was pretend
Yes.
or,
like
something that was just.
if they're even watching a cartoon, which is rare, okay, and it's even selective what they would be watching, I ask them, is that a real bear, or is that not real? And if they say it's real, I'm like, okay, it's not actually real. Do you know why I say that? And then I'll explain. So my kids are very good at distinguishing what's real and what's not real. We don't tell them about, okay, here's the thing. Remember we talked about, I brought up that point about going along with things or resisting it.
Yeah.
So just playing devil's advocate, pretend like you didn't already know what the answer would be. If I wasn't going to just go along with the concept of Santa Claus, what do you think I would do then as the average parent?
Tell them Santa
If I didn't
Claus
want
is
my
not
kids to
real.
be impulsed with the idea. Yeah.
Or if you didn't want them to be impulsed with the idea
Yeah.
of Santa.
You're like, no, Santa Claus is not real. And we got to make sure that anybody who's coming around saying Santa Claus is like, nope, Santa Claus is not real. You got to make sure you know that it's not real.
Also, avoid everything I can about
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
Oh,
Yeah.
Christmas, watch out.
Right. Which creates what is that I'm not supposed to
No,
look
no,
at?
no, no. Don't look.
So you're creating the thing you think you're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
That's why you can't just either go along with it or resist it.
Wow.
So what do we do? Hey, he's like, who's that thing? What is that thing that's like a big blow up thing at Christmas or whatever? I'm like, oh, that's a character called Santa Claus. He's like, what's Santa Claus? I'm like, well, it's this thing. It's a person. It's a character. It's not a real person, but people believe it. Some people pretend or believe or accept that it's real. And I tell them the story about what Santa Claus is. And I say, people believe that he can fly to your house and deliver presents to your chimney. And he's like, what? And I'm like, does that make sense? And he's like, and this is what he says to me. He's 3 years old. How does he fit down the chimney? Because we have a chimney in our house. And he's like, how does a person go down there?
Yeah.
And
That
I'm
guy's fat.
I know, it doesn't make sense, does it? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
Right. And then to the point of, I even said to him, I said, what about people who don't have chimneys? And he's like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. You know, and like, what if they live inside of an apartment complex? How does he get into their house? And I explained to him, I'm like, now, do you know why people say that Santa Claus does it? And I tell him, like, do you know that the parents on Christmas, they'll buy presents for their kids? Because we don't do that. You know, when we want to get something for our kids, we just get it for them. We don't need to tie it to
No, you gotta wait till Christmas. You gotta write it down.
Right.
You gotta mail it to some fake address.
We give our 3-year-old $10 every week on Sundays, so he can buy what he wants. He has his own allowance.
That's his holy day.
And mostly he wants to buy mini drones and then break them and buy another mini drone.
That's
He's
so
going to
funny.
learn over time at some point, and we keep explaining and helping him understand and build context that, oh, I could save my money and do more with it, or I could invest it or whatever, but I'm not trying to control what he does with it right now.
Yeah.
Although I'm explaining. I'm
And
not just
the
like,
mini
do whatever
drone
you
thing
want,
is
buy
really
a
funny
fucking
too.
knife. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. But what I'm saying is, like, I'm going to explain to him, like, okay, in this context, I'm not going to allow you, I'm going to prevent you from having this thing. And here's why. Okay. But in this, so we explaining everything, right?
Just
But
imagining your 3-year-old walking around with a pocket knife, just like, hey.
Well,
Dude,
went
it's
to
so
a-
funny. Max being 2, and like you have videos of him like flying a drone and like crashing and destroying it, and like just he just
We-
like now
we
what?
went to a sporting goods store a couple weeks ago. Remember I sent you that picture, Drake, of that shirt that had your name on it, right?
Yeah.
And I took him into the
Fox.
section. I took him into the section that had like knives, like hunting knives, and they had like packages with like Swiss Army knives. And he is like taking them off the shelf. Of course, you can't get into it, but he's taking them off the shelf, like carrying around, like, we're gonna get this. I'm gonna buy this knife. And I was explaining to him like that's not something that you're gonna be able to handle effectively yet. When you get a little bit older, you'll be able to. I don't know when. I'm not gonna say when you're 8, because some people say when you're 8 you get a knife. Like, what if they're still retarded when they're 8?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to be, but I'm just saying, like, why make it arbitrary like that? It's like, well, when I can see developmentally, you know, awareness wise, you can handle something like having a pocket knife, then you can have one. But right now, that's not the context. But I'm not
Right.
like, no, put that back. You're not getting it. I'm not worried that when we get to the register or we start walking out the door and I say it's time to put it away, I'm not concerned he's going to start begging and crying and whining. Because the way we've worked with him and so forth and his sister over time is that we haven't created that by constantly being afraid of it. And that's going back to like what we've been talking about this whole time. We're not parenting from the perspective of, I'm afraid of this happening, so everything I do is from the starting point of fearing it. It's more from the perspective of what will be best for him. So let's create that. And let's challenge the points within ourselves that come up as barriers to doing that, because those are the points that we're going to create from fear. So parenting is 99% more about you as the parent working on yourself, using the tools that we're promoting and so forth, using those tools, working on yourself so that you don't fuck your child up. You see what I mean? But at the same time, you don't want to go in that direction of, oh, well, you know, children are just born geniuses and all this shit. Like, I've never seen a baby come out the womb doing calculus.
No,
You know what I mean? Like, genetically, some kids are going to pick up math and stuff easier or certain things, just like given just not really trying to create that result. You're going to have this disparity and so forth. Of course, we don't accept that, meaning we're going to still support everybody, right? Those who are willing to support themselves and their kids and so forth. But my point is, you know, we're not doing things from this. We're not accepting the point that because, you know, it's like, with my son, this will definitely trigger people. I remember saying this early on to somebody. I said to them, I don't care if when my son is older, if he loves me or not. I don't care if when he's older, he wants to come visit me when I'm in a fucking nursing home. Because number one, I'm not going to be in a nursing home, but you know, like that's the image people have of like, well, since I'm going to be in a fucking nursing home because I'm a loser, because I'm not doing anything in this world where I can not create that situation for myself. Do you see what I mean? Okay, that aside, because I'm accepting the fact that that's the reality I've been given that's going to happen to me. I now have to control my child and tell them how much I love them all the time and ask them if they love me and do all these things to make sure that when we get to that
I'm
point,
old.
they're
You're gonna
come
take
visit
care of me, right? You're gonna take care of me when I get
But you
old.
know what? When you do that, you're guaranteeing that child is not going to take care of you. Or in the other side of it, they're going to feel so much guilt that they're going to do it simply out of the guilt, but they're going to resent you the whole time.
Yeah.
And they're not just going to come and visit you and like be with you and be like, hey, I like being around you. Like, let's talk and let me fill you in on what's been going on in my life. And let's, what have you been doing? And like, what have you been learning about? And, like you're really there with the person. They're just like, hey, grandma, come on, kids. We're coming to visit grandma. Hey, grandma. Okay. Oh, the Merch has to come in to feed their grandma. Okay. Let's all get out real quick. And then it's like, oh, well, we got to go, grandma. See you later. Like that's how I experienced visiting my great grandmother when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Where it was just like, I don't want to fucking be here. Nobody wants to be here. Why are we here?
Right.
You know what I mean? So with my son, it's like, I would rather, I'm not saying that this is what is going to happen, but I'm just saying if you have to play the game of
your priorities,
choices, right?
What's
Exactly,
most
right?
important. Yeah.
Like if it's like worst case scenario, just to give a person the concept of like how I'm pushing the point of self-honesty within myself is I would rather support him to be effective in this world so that he has real purpose that he's given himself and he's so effective and he's so free of guilt or any feeling of obligation whatsoever that if I have, maybe put it this way, if I've done things to limit him, why should he feel like he needs to take care of me? So in other words, what I'm guaranteeing is that the only way he's going to want to talk to me when I'm older, visit me, be around me, whatever the particular thing is, the only way that's going to happen is because he's going to respect me so much from the perspective of, wow, you supported me to become the person I am as my role as a parent, and you've given me that foundation. But not even just that as an obligation, like you add value to my life right now. Like by me visiting you and talking to you, like you're helping me expand my viewpoint because you have more wisdom. And you see what I mean? Like as opposed to what parents are doing, which is my child has way more energy than I do. And I'm going to suck it all up because I ran out of energy a long time ago. Why? Because I was chasing it this whole time and I got burnt out on that. And I'm just going to suck up their innocence and basically turn them into a copy of myself. So it's like you have 3 and 4-year-olds where they're already cynical about life. I mean, they may not express it obviously as like a cynicism, but you can see it. You know what I mean?
Like school field trips with ages 4 to 10. And I would say, probably after 5, 6 kindergarten, but like grade 1, it's like weird, like their outlook on life at 6, 7, 8, it's weird. But going back to what you're saying, it's like the reason we end up resenting our parents is because we look around and we're like, this kid is happier than I am, or they get more, or whatever. Why don't I have that? Why you keep me back? Why? It's like all these points of resentment because we don't understand what's going on. And we're not effective in this world. Where it's like
also the fears that you have. Guess what? You see, oh, you have those fears. You did this to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
You did this to me. It's I'm your genetics. I'm all your fears. I'm all your beliefs. I'm all your limitations.
You get angry all the time. And I get angry and like
my education is because of you. Everything about my life is because of, and like we talked about in the God thing, like the parents are the gods in that context. You are creating that being. Now, also you have the support of the system as well. So it's not just the parent because there's a lot of influence by the media and the system and so forth.
But they're like the final point. They're like,
well, it's like, it's ultimately the only real point of responsibility where anything could change. You just expect the system to change by itself. It's doing what it's designed to do. The only thing that's going to change it is the parent. And there's going to be a lot of people maybe in the world right now who are not in a position to change it. So who are we talking to? The ones who are in a position to do it. Because when you change it, you make it easier for other people to change it. And then it keeps going from there to the point where the people who literally can't change it because the system is so oppressive in terms of the circumstances of their life, well, we change that too. You see what I mean? But that requires we have to have people to vote for that because you can't do it through revolution.
And so going back to like the way you approach parenting with Max, where if you just, again, don't limit him and you're not afraid of him not taking care of you and not caring about you and moving away and all this stuff, it's like the natural consequence of that actually is what you're doing, which is allowing him to understand reality and become effective. And the consequence of that is when he's 13 and he looks around at his peers and he's like, whoa, I got set up a lot better than anybody around me. that's what's going to generate the love, right? And not the feeling of like, oh my God, Dad. It's like, Dad, thank you. Mom, thank you.
Last night,
And then his giving to you guys of like, hey, well, if I can give to them, imagine how much more they can give to me. And then it's this virtuous cycle that's really genuinely created, not out of guilt, but out of just genuinely like Max just wants to give.
and I don't in any way, this is my process of looking at things with self-honesty and pushing myself. I don't see any reason why he owes me anything. You know what I mean? Like what does he owe me personally? Because
You know what? You know what's a great example of your self-honesty that made me react? Anybody I tell, it makes them react right away.
What?
He doesn't call you Dad.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I remember when you told us about that, and I'd see him do it. He's like, Cam, Katie. I was like, whoa, dude, why would you? And I'm like, wait. Like, I'm sure that was a point inside you where you had to question it, right?
Well, the point came up of why is it necessary anymore? So what do you think a parent's reaction? Let's say they have this thought and they go,
It's disrespectful.
why can't they call him? Okay, what else?
Right.
Why does that matter?
Because I'm Dad, like I'm Mom.
They're going to grow up thinking
authority.
that parents and authority don't need to be respected. Like, who are they going to become if they don't respect authority?
Yeah, exactly.
Shit.
So that's not the child I want to create. And that's my self-honesty, is realizing if I'm just like, no, he needs to call me Dad, because if he calls me Cam, he's going to start seeing me as an equal. He might start questioning my authority. I'm like, well, am I worried about that? Am I worried? What am I worried? He's going to like fight me or something? Like, what am I worried about? Like, if I'm saying something that makes sense, in other words, if the only leverage I have is by forcing him to continue calling me Dad, and that's the only reason he's listening to me, how's that gonna work long term? That's the only tool I have in my toolkit here. I don't have reasoning. I don't have common sense. I don't have my living example as someone who clearly is doing things in a way that this person would want to emulate, that he sees me as trustworthy because I always follow through on what I tell him I'm going to do. That we build his vocabulary every day with Technotutor to the point where he can understand what we're saying. It's like, when I'm evaluating a situation with the kids, it's like, there's a limitation. Okay. Can I accept the limitation, or is there a way where I can support them to grow out of it? Which one do you think I would choose?
Support them.
Why would I choose the limitation?
Yeah.
But that's what parents will constantly do. Why? Because number one, they don't have Technotutor yet, and they don't understand these points that we're talking about. So I understand also, like, sometimes we're going to be talking about things on the podcast where it's not because a person can't understand it. It's just because you're not at that process yet. It's like no different to if you're a first year engineering student and I'm lecturing in the third year course. You're just not going to understand it. It's not because you're dumb. It's not because you can't understand it. It's just you haven't got there yet. So there may be some things where you might have to put it on the back burner for a minute and be like, well, I don't know if I can get that, or if I understand, or if I agree with it. The first step is start using the tools that we're suggesting, right? Because we're not in any way wanting to create a situation where people just listen to us and it's like entertainment and it's just, okay, keep telling me more. Tell me more of what to do. Tell me more of what to do. No, all we're doing is stimulating your curiosity and sharing a little bit about our experience, because it will ultimately support. I know our conversations will support people, because then they'll have someone where they'll go like, oh, that I remember that time Cameron questioned this point about, whether his kids should call him Dad, and his thought process was this. And then they can evaluate it and they can consider that as part of the equation, instead of only having the option of, well, my parents said that I had to call him Dad, so he has to call me Dad.
Yeah.
Like that's usually the only, people only have what they were taught. So they don't have an alternative. So that's kind of how I see what we're doing, is kind of just giving our thought processes so people can look at it and be like, oh, cool. That's because no one taught you to think like this. Your parents didn't teach you to be self-honest. They weren't self-honest. They just had a lot of fear. They projected that fear onto you, and they controlled you not to do stuff that they did when they were kids. And they weren't even honest with you about that. Like, we'll tell our children when they want something and they're really asking us for it. And, like Max, for example, because Seneca, she's not really at that stage where she sees a lot that she wants outside of what she already has. You know what I mean? Whereas Max is aware of a lot more, right? So he might ask for a pocket knife or whatever, right? And I'll say, look, we're not going to do it, and here's why, and I'll explain everything. He still, in that context, might be like, well, I still want one. Like, I really do want one, Cam. I really want to get one. And it's like, well, clearly something I'm explaining is not fully clicking yet. He can't see the full picture of why it doesn't make sense yet. Okay. Now, does that mean I can't get a pocket knife and let him use it from time to time and we play with it in a specific environment? Yeah, we could do that. But that's different than he's just walking around with it, you know, because it could fall out of his pocket. His sister could get it. There's so many things that just practically don't make sense at the stage he's at, right? But he still might not see all of that. So I don't then just go, well, okay, here you go. But also when he's like, come on, Dad, I really want it, or Cam or whatever, I really want a pocket knife. I'm like, well, I understand, but I explained to you why we're not going to. Is there anything that's unclear about it? Because we're not going to do it. But if it's not clear, I can explain more. That's okay.
Like,
well,
even the point of why, just going into the reasons of why a kid shouldn't have a pocket knife. It's like me, I'm like, yeah, of course the kid shouldn't have a pocket knife. It's dangerous.
But they don't have all that context.
Exactly. Like going in within yourself of like, okay, why shouldn't a kid be left alone with scissors?
Right. So as a parent, I have to question things more. And here's the thing. This is why parents get so fucking annoyed when their kids ask why.
I don't know why.
They don't know why. They didn't, like, we were just like the very beginning of this conversation.
Exactly.
They don't know why they think the purpose of life is the pursuit of happiness. Like, and that's when people get defensive. They're like, dude, I mean, come on, man. It's just obvious. Like, you know, that's like you see this stuff in politics when they're like, you know, talking about things like whether it's the coronavirus or it's this or that or whatever. People say like, just believe science, man. Come on, you just got to believe. You don't believe science? I'm like, no, because I actually understood the first lesson, which is called the scientific method, where they said you should never believe any conclusion. Like, you should always test it and keep testing it. Like, did you not understand the first lesson of science? No, they didn't.
To that point, like, you know, the whole thing that we're saying is investigate for yourself. Actually, and I guess that is one of the principles as well. But that's later on down the road,
what's best? Yeah.
Exactly. But it's also tied into this self-honesty point, and it's being honest about, okay, someone says this in the media, you know, like, I know this is going to trigger people. Black Lives Matter. You know, oh, it sounds so great and everything, but did you actually investigate it? Did you actually?
How can you argue with it, right?
Yeah. And so it's like you were saying earlier about bringing up, okay, there's two people running and they're both saying they're going to do what's best for all, but like, if they've got two completely different ideas or paths,
how do you evaluate it?
Exactly. And you can't just go off of the one that sounds good. You can't just go off of like, no, they said they're going to do things for Black people, and this other guy, he didn't say that, so go on with them. You know, it's like, but did you actually evaluate what they're actually saying? You know, because it can sound really nice, but when you look at their principles, you look at their platform, you look at where they're going, if you actually understood it, you'd say, you know what, I'm good on that, you know. But
if people evaluated things based on whether it actually is like makes sense, why would McDonald's exist?
Why would we need to have politicians giving us ads?
Exactly.
You know,
why would, like, the fact that people are not yet able and willing to look at things completely common sense, rational, what's best, is why sales exists.
It's also why. It's also why people don't vote and people don't get involved in their government or local governments or any of that, because
what do you mean?
Well, because they would actually have to consider, like, a lot of people, the way they look at it is, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. It doesn't matter. You know, and so sign, you know, all D or all R, or, you know, whatever it is, right? Whatever political party that you're affiliated with or not affiliated with. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense for me to look into this because they don't understand it. They don't actually really consider what is best in any context at all, not even just for themselves, you know, and they just rather go, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be corrupt anyway. It's like, no, actually go look at the people that you want. If you want people who are representing you, go look at what is available to you and vote for the ones that are
most representing you. And if they're not there, you become that person. Take on
Right.
that responsibility.
That's where people usually stop.
Oh, they stopped
Because
way
they're
before
like, well,
that.
no one's doing it, so I'm not going to vote. And it's
They
like,
stopped way before that, man.
voting isn't going to change anything if the options are all shit.
Yeah.
But then you can't just be like, well, the options are all shit, so it's the system's fault. It's like,
Yeah.
but then you should be the point that actually goes into it and does it, which is kind of what we're saying in a lot of contexts, right?
Yeah.
We're talking
Seeing
about
this?
we're
Yeah.
talking about 3 different angles, right? And from the Destiny stuff, you'll be able to see it. You need self-forgiveness. You need self-honesty. You need self-forgiveness. You need self-correction. We've talked about the reasons before of if you're completely honest but you don't know how to let go of stuff, you're going to blow your brains out because you're going to acknowledge all the flaws in this world and in yourself. And if you don't know how to let go of that in a way that's productive, from
That's
the
a
point
good
of
point.
taking
People don't want to look
responsibility
at
for
it because they're like, I can't change it, so why focus on the
exactly.
negative?
That's why this fundamental assumption, the way we're interpreting everything, is I can't change. Right?
That's why we're not afraid of looking at it. Because we know,
Exactly.
okay, if
It's
it
a
triggers me,
result
I can change
of-
it. I know how to forgive
Exactly.
that point. I know how to check and see if I changed it. So I'm not
It's
worried
the-
about going there.
Because we've been able to acknowledge that, oh, I existed before this opinion, so I'll exist after I change this opinion. That alone is like, okay, so I can question my opinions. It's not who I am.
That's a cool
opinion
way
is
to
not
put
me.
that. That's
Yeah,
a
that
really
is
cool way to put that.
So it's like going through the process of Technotutor is putting ourselves back in the state of, oh, I'm like getting back to the root of who I am. Of when I was a child, I questioned everything. Why? Because I wasn't like, I saw this one time and therefore that's how it is. If somebody was like, hey, there's a different way of doing this, you'd be like, oh, show me. Because it looks like you're getting a better result than I am. Right? Now, what about if it's something a little more abstract that you can't see the result? You have to be able to see the consequences of things, right? Where people who are suggesting a bunch of different solutions to police brutality or the corruption in this world or, you know, the capitalism and all this stuff, whatever they're suggesting, I'm sure you guys, like, because we've talked about it, it's like you can see how that's just going to create more problems. But it goes back to what Cameron, you were talking about before, about the way we've created society, the way we've created ourselves, is like we've just come to accept these axioms of this is how reality works and this is what it is, and then let's create from there. Oh, it created a bunch of symptoms. Okay, now let's figure out how we can implement another system to fix those symptoms. Or what about going back and questioning the fundamental axioms, the beliefs, or whatever the case may be? No. Fuck that. Let's stay at this level because that would require me to change in ways that I'm not comfortable.
Well, no one has done the research themselves.
Yes.
So a perfect example of that is like the health industry where people take drugs to deal with some symptom, which creates more side effects, and they take drugs to cover up those side effects, which creates more. And like you have people on
It's
all
like
these
the
drugs. And I
ultimate
find out like
manifestation of that.
you've been on Prozac for 20 years and statins and all that. I'm like, holy shit, man. Like the most I'll ever take is like an aspirin or something. You know what I mean? Like at the most. I'm not doing all this other shit, you know, and then I take multivitamins and all that stuff, right? But also within the context of even going to, okay, let's take the medicine thing out of the window for a moment because I don't really want to talk about the medical industry.
Yeah,
We'll
Cameron,
just
what
get
about all the
fucked by-
people who have to see, you know,
we'll just
like-
get fucked by like Apple or somebody for
Right.
saying something we shouldn't say. But like, let's just say something else, like just arbitrary, like, okay, here's one that's just fun to talk about. Like the whole thing about dinosaurs, right? Okay. Because there's people who argue that dinosaurs aren't real. Okay. So why am I bringing that up? And I'm not going to pretend like I know one way or the other. Well, actually I do, but I'm not going to try to prove it. Okay. But my point is, imagine you're somebody who grows up and your parent, because you're a boy, let's say, because that's the way your parents think, you're a boy. So you're going to like dinosaurs and they show you dinosaur movies and you have dinosaur shirts and then, think about this.
Don't forget the pajamas though.
Yeah, definitely the pajamas. Okay, but hold on. Before you saw dinosaurs ever, okay, they had to choose what toy to introduce to you.
Yeah.
They could have given you a toy car or they could have given you a dinosaur. And let's say in this case, they gave you a dinosaur. You playing with the dinosaur. Okay, next time you go to a store, what do you think you're going to ask for?
Dinosaur.
Now, what does the parent think?
He
Oh,
likes
wow,
dinosaurs.
He really likes dinosaurs. Wow, he really likes dinosaurs. And they're like, oh, he likes dinosaurs. He likes dinosaurs. They get dinosaur toys. So now suddenly the kid loves dinosaurs, is obsessed with dinosaurs. Why? Because he was impulsed with it. It's like you have a pond that's perfectly pristine, pure, no ripples, and someone throws a ripple in it. You created that ripple. You see what I mean? Like you created that attachment to that particular object by putting that in their presence. And then also you likely had some sort of emotional like thing of like, oh, you're gonna like dinosaurs. I like dinosaurs because there was a reason why you chose the dinosaur over the car. So you're in a way without consciously saying it to them, you're telling them this is important emotionally. So then they're creating an emotional attachment to it. So then they're creating this point within themselves. They like dinosaurs. They're obsessed with dinosaurs. They're reading dinosaur books when they're 8, 9, 10, etc. They want to be a paleontologist. And they said that one time and you're like, oh, that sounds prestigious. They want to be, you want to be a paleontologist. Now you're reinforcing that. You're sending them to fucking paleontology camp. They go to college. They become a paleontologist. Okay. Did this child anywhere in this process most likely read the original book of the first person who discovered a dinosaur bone?
No.
No.
Are they even necessarily aware? Because their understanding of dinosaurs is Jurassic Park and the toys that they played
A Land
with.
Before Time. Don't
the
forget.
little dumbed down kids books that you got them.
Yeah.
And you read 2 different books on dinosaurs, and guess what? The T-Rex looks different.
Fuck,
Oh, yeah.
you're right.
And then the other book, it has feathers. You're like, so they don't fucking know. Right. So, but my point is now this kid, but imagine at that point, even if somebody said, hey, here's the original book of the guy who discovered the first dinosaur. And it turns out he found one bone and then he drew a whole picture of the dinosaur based on what he imagined it would be. And then the next guy read his book and was so inspired by it, he came up with a whole family of dinosaurs based on that, of what other dinosaurs could look like. And then they went and found some bones over here in Arizona that kind of looked like that. So they said, oh, we found that dinosaur. But the guy literally fucking made it up over here. And so they found something that kind of looks like it, and then they extrapolate and blah, blah, blah. Okay, is this child even gonna be able to question that point?
Not even close. No.
No.
Why? Why?
Because they've already got like an emotional attachment to like
It's their whole life.
their image.
It's who they are.
It's-
Everything emotionally, everything is built upon this point. So now, so all this kid really does is they go to college because, well, that's where you're going to learn about paleontology, right? And they read the textbooks that are somebody's deliberate interpretation of all the information, not taking everything into account, leaving some things out because they say that's a fraud or that's a conspiracy theory or this or that. So we're only using this set of books. That's the canon, as they call it. And then they write textbooks based on that. And that's what the kid studies. And the textbooks already have conclusions about what everything means and what it is that they're telling you. They're not giving you the whole story. They're giving you 50 years of research in one paragraph here, 20 years here, 30 years there. You don't read the original papers or the books. And now this child becomes an expert on paleontology. And then they go and they start talking on talk shows, and they have this really great charisma. So they're really good at talking about it. And they're just repeating all the stuff in the books. And because of the way they present themselves, everyone's like, this is an expert. You don't question that. And then other people listen to it. And so it becomes this point where, without even knowing whether the whole thing is valid or not, it doesn't matter. Did you do all that research and actually look at it for yourself? Or is there a certain point where you just jumped on the train and you're like, I like where this is going. Like, I'm going to get on here. This is cool. I don't know where we came from, but I like it.
Yeah.
You didn't do any of that research. And just with that simple example, because it's kind of a neutral example, although it's a little bit of triggering because there's a lot of people who are so fascinated by, I don't give a fuck about dinosaurs. We have some dinosaur books because somebody gave it to us. So we got it from half price, and my kids will look at it, but we're not overemphasizing. And we'll tell them, like, this is what some people think existed a long time ago. Did it look like that? We don't know. It could be. No one really knows. Like, we just tell them the honest point about where it's actually at. We don't sit there and tell them dinosaurs are not real, Like, we're just showing them, like, this is just what somebody put together and what people think existed. We don't really have a way of verifying it. So we're telling them like an adult level perspective of common sense about it in terms of what we understand. So but the point is, we're not trying to interject an emotional attachment to it.
Even like, oh, don't believe in that crap. Don't read that stuff. Like,
That's also emotional. That's also like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm superior because I don't believe in X, Y, or Z, or I don't believe we went to the moon. So I know you idiots who believed in the moon. Like, you're still creating an emotional point about it. You don't care about the truth. You just want your special point. So the reason I brought it up is because how often does anybody do the real research on anything?
Never.
So we've become so accustomed to not doing it because people can't read fast enough to do it. Like that stuff I was sending you last night.
Dude, that was too much.
And I know most people are not going to be able to read it, but I'm just reading it. I'm like, oh, dude, that reminds me of this blog over here from Heaven's Journey to Life.
Yeah.
And then I'm sending him like the blog, the
Yeah.
paragraph that's like literally saying the same thing as Hegel said about what is self.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
That's
and
what
like,
we
there
did
it is.
when we
Look,
started the
it's
last
confirmed.
podcast.
Like it's right there. Huh?
That's what we did when we started the last podcast. You're like, oh, guys,
Yeah.
read this blog.
But my point is, it's just a matter of basic reading ability, which most people don't have because where were you taught to read?
In a school or
Which is based on principles where most people involved didn't do the research.
yeah.
They just going along with it and they don't realize what the real point is.
Wow.
And Mitch and I did some really cool videos about like reading and education. And then I also did a podcast with one of your Technotutor clients, Drake,
Yeah.
David, right?
Yeah.
Really cool podcast. And on his thing called Surviving the System, we talked about the history of the education system. And it was kind of my kind of putting together my synthesis of like John Taylor Gatto and like a bunch of other research that I've done and really looked into some of these points. And then also looking at my own experience and where we're going in the future and all that. But my point is like, how many people really even questioning the education system other than just they don't like the result,
Yeah.
but then not realizing it's designed to produce that result.
At this current point in time, yeah, it's just easy enough to just keep going along with the system. And it's also easy to just complain about it and cast the blame on others.
But now look at what's going on right now in the world.
Yeah.
This is the consequence of that
Yes.
attitude.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool is that people are waking up and the people who are on the fence are now actually realizing, wow, if I can really develop myself and be plugged into other people who are doing this, so I'm not alone. It's like they don't turn into that crazy like scientist who like, goes and locks himself in the laboratory or whatever. It's just a real normal thing to actually question these things and research and verify with other people and live from principle. Like it's becoming more normal.
You know what the problem with most research is? Because we were talking about this before the podcast. Because you were asking me, what was the question? You said I don't want to put words in your mouth. It was like kind of like what does it mean when you,
Yeah, within some of the stuff that Bernard Pullman talks about, he says we've done the research on this, and he just says it's so matter of fact. And I know that you lived with it,
right?
Yeah.
So I was giving my perspective of like when I'm talking about do the research or have you done your research or have you researched this or whatever. The problem with most research, because when people hear that term, what do they think?
Lab coats.
Scientific articles.
Yeah.
Is it in a peer-reviewed journal? That kind of
Yeah.
thing. And like, if anybody's ever been in sales and you've done anything that in any way has some sort of a research component behind it, or is in any way scientific or technological or whatever, right? It doesn't have the brand name that people just automatically do it. It's like you get these objections sometimes like, well, where's the research that backs up what you're doing or what you're saying, right? And people do that all the time online right now. Like you'll say something about something and they'll be like, well, where's your research that proves that? Like with the Black Lives Matter, it's like, if you were to push back on something that they said, like what's one of the big ones? Like Black people are just walking down the street and being murdered by police left and right. It's just like everyday thing. And you're like, well, where's the research? What do you say? So you actually look at the research. That's not what it says, right?
Yeah, it's clearly not every day.
Right. It's not actually what the numbers are. We could still talk about the fact that it's a problem and so forth. But the point is when you don't actually have the research. Okay. But here's the issue with research is if you're sticking with just the research that's like in the peer-reviewed journal, one major problem is that they create journals specifically so that they will have a place to go and publish their research so that they can then start getting quoted by other researchers and so forth, so they can become more prominent as a scientist and so forth. So you have entire research journals that are very specific that really don't really add much to the conversation at all, just so they have a place to go publish. Like you can find, like trans feminist third wave ideology, and it's like a journal dedicated to just that. So if like the 3 people in the world who want to write a paper about how, whatever their viewpoint is, and they can use the specific jargon and language, then they have a place they can publish. But the standards are whoever's in that little circle is the one reviewing it. So they're all just basically reviewing each other's shit and propping each other up. And then there was this thing done. You guys will have to look it up later because I don't remember the details of it, but somebody was trying to show this absurdity of some of this, and they published like a research paper. You know what I'm talking about? Where they said,
where they said
it was like something about
rape culture in dogs. And,
oh no, I wasn't talking about that one. I was talking about the one where it was about quantum gravity being inherently like racist, white supremacist, patriarchal, etc.
Oh, that's good.
And that they were looking at the structures of white supremacy and all that within the concepts of quantum gravity and all this stuff. And literally the people who wrote the paper made the fucking thing up on purpose to be ridiculous, to not actually be real research.
Yeah.
But because it fit the political correctness agenda of what the people who run the journals want to be promoted, which is not about the science, it was about the conclusions. It got published in a peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah.
And then the people come out and they say, we scammed you. And then they try to backtrack and be like, oh, just trying to, you know, like it wasn't really reviewed. We made a mistake and all this, that, you know, it didn't actually meet our standards and all this. You know, they try to like backtrack because they got caught.
Right. They did that with a few.
People have done this,
stories, right? And few journals. Yeah. Yeah.
The other major problem though, is that the people who are doing the research have spent their whole life like that paleontologist kid in chemistry or biology or whatever the thing is. But let me ask you a question. If you're a like real dedicated expert in chemistry, let's just say like inorganic chemistry, what the fuck do you know about astrophysics? What do you know about economics?
Not much.
What do you know about, you know what I mean? Like anything else, analytic philosophy, like anything else. So how are you able to synthesize what you're doing within the context of everything else? You have to isolate it so much. It's like a narrow thing that the only person who can understand what you did really, generally speaking, is somebody else who has that same level of experience within your field.
Yeah.
So if you're a person who says, well, where's the research? And you're like, okay, well, here's this inorganic chemistry study over here, and you give that to them. You think they're gonna be able to process that?
No.
So when someone says, where's the research? What they really want to hear is, where is a journal that just says exactly what you, like the headline says, what you're presenting is the truth. And they're like, ah, good enough to me. Cool. Checks out. They're not actually doing the research. They're looking for the headline that reinforces the thing they already think.
They just want an authority to agree with.
They're not going to read it. Like, it's like, if you give them the research. So it's like people ask me about like what's happening to, like, where's the research? I'm like, well, here's the 5 or 6 handbooks on literacy and early literacy. Have you read those? Because if you had, you would know, as I know, everything it's saying in there shows that what we're doing is a solution, even just to the literacy issue.
Yeah.
But then what is a person expecting is that you're going to have a university that specifically did a study that's like very singular focused, but they're not able to integrate everything else either. They're not going to take in all the other information. They're actually going to like, it's like, for example, imagine if like you were talking to somebody and they never had sex before, and you're like, dude, gotta have sex. It's a great thing, right? And they're like, well, where's the research? Can you imagine what the laboratory research experiment would be? Like sex? What I'm saying is, does it have anything? It's going to be such a weird, it's like we had 5 men and 6 women, or 5 women in a room, in separate rooms, in hermetically sealed chambers, and we tickled their foot to measure their excitability response, and then we measured the dopamine levels, and then we determined that, and therefore we think this, you know what I mean? You're like, there's nothing to do with the full context of the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because even if you had that little bit of research, when you go and you have sex the first time, you're like, oh, this is actually like a thing I'm doing. This is not just, you know what I mean? It's like dancing, or it's like painting. It's like a physical, you can read all about it in a book. That's not going to be the same as when you do it, you know? So the major problem, to get to my main point here, is our education system and our parenting has created a reality, or has participated in creating a reality where everybody can't read really effectively, but even what they can read is so singularly, narrowly focused that they can't put together information in different contexts and see how it all connects. So when I'm saying do the research, I'm saying like in the whole context of what you're looking at. Because like we can sit there and have this conversation, and then we can go and look at postmodern philosophy, but then we can also go look at economics, which are obviously closely related. But then we can also go look at biology, and we have ways to build our vocabulary, to increase our vocabulary, increasing our processing ability, so that we can have a conversation about multiple different points and they all come together. So it's like our conversation right now is not very linear. It's like we're kind of just randomly jumping here and there, but it's always about the same point, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for someone to really fully understand what we're talking about, what are they going to have to do?
They're going to have to be able to process a lot of information.
Yeah.
So we're actually creating more of a
watching your
problem.
videos,
Right. We're creating more of a problem with these podcasts than a solution. You see what I'm saying? Because the solution is the person has to now go do the work within themselves, question their limitations, increase their processing ability, walk this process. That's how it starts to make sense. There's no, 5-page essay I can write that makes it all make sense for you. Everyone always wants that. Like, can you just send me some quick information about it? It's like, no, it doesn't. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not it. Like, you can either look at me and see this person's kind of making sense. They seem like somebody I should kind of listen to more. I'm interested, and then go all the way with it and really test the point out
for yourself,
or just be like, I don't see it. I don't get it. I'm out of here.
I wanted to go into that point of, because with self-forgiveness, self-honesty, self-correction, right? Self-correction is going and doing the thing. Self-honesty is being able to put things back into question. And self-forgiveness is letting go to all the things that you've accepted and allowed so that you can go correct. And so in the self-forgiveness statement, right, we say accept and allow. And I remember at first I was just like, why do we have to say both, right? But you look at it, and they're very specific. And the reason why this matters, okay, it's like, remember when we were talking about the dinosaur thing? You're like, it's not about the way in which you present it with Max and Seneca. It's just, you just explain to them what's going on. Versus if you're like, oh, my son really likes dinosaurs, it's coming from some kind of emotional attachment. In the same way that if you're like, oh, stay away from that stuff, like I don't want you learning about that stuff or whatever, whether it be fuck the dinosaurs, whether it be about you're trying to impose religion or completely deny religion or impose, whatever it is, right? Even food, whatever, okay? It's like both of them are the two sides of the same coin, which is some kind of point of superiority and inferiority, where you see some group of people as either losers because they believe something or like better than you because they understand more than you understand, right? And it's like we judge people and then we go and judge people for judging people. As in, I was having a conversation with somebody and they're like, I don't like what this person was saying. They're kind of just like judging these people, right? They're just kind of, it seemed like they were just, they're kind of making a mockery of this certain situation. It was like some show or whatever. And the people who watch the show and, like, look at these people just, doing that. Yeah. And the point was, it's like, okay, so let's take that back to ourselves. How are we trying to create some kind of relationship of, oh, I'm better than this person? And I'd ask the person, I'm like, how are you creating this relationship of, I'm better than this group of people because of this? And like, oh, well, I kind of do it in sports. True, because they're willing to be honest, right? They're like, I kind of do it in sports and I kind of do it with like my education and things like that. And I was like, it even goes further. What about every Facebook post that you see where you're like, this person's dumb because they believe that, or you see a picture and you're like, oh, that person has a way better life than me and I'm down here. Or literally every political video that you've ever seen ever. It's like, that person is an idiot for what they're saying, or I agree with that person and whoever doesn't, like this figurative person that disagrees with that person, they're idiots. Like, how could you not believe this point, right? It's like all those points of inferiority, superiority, or just arrogance or whatever you want to call it, right? And it's like, if you accept that in yourself, then you're going to allow it in your environment. How that relates to self-honesty, right? If you're not willing to be honest with yourself and you're not willing to look at all the parts of yourself that you're not questioning, then don't expect other people to go question these things, right? Because you're just going to be you'll never support somebody else to understand what you understand if you're just afraid of questioning things for yourself, because It's like, what if I was like, you know, let's say me and Mitchell had a different kind of relationship, and I was like, hey, Mitchell, like, you know, you didn't handle that very well, man. You know, like you could do this better. And what if my fear would be, Mitchell would just be like, oh, well, you're not so perfect yourself. You've got some things that you got to improve on yourself. And if I'm afraid of questioning that or whatever it is, like I'm just going to like freak out and be like, oh shit, like he's right. Like there's things that I need to work on, so I can't tell him to work on anything. It's like, you have to be able to let go of that. And the only way you'll be able to do that is when you're not afraid of questioning, of being honest with yourself. Where in the same way that even if I did have stuff to work on in myself, if I suggest something to Mitchell, he's not going to be like, well, Asif, you're not perfect yourself, so you change yourself, and when you're perfect, then you can tell me what to do. That's stupid. Mitchell would be like, if that came up within him, he'd just be like, okay, but I still have to look at that point for myself, because he's willing to be self-honest. But the starting point is that you actually know how to change yourself. You actually know that you're not defined by some idea that you have or some behavior that you're doing, because there was a point in time when you weren't doing that. And there's going to be a point in time where you don't believe in that, or if you're willing to question things. Or going back to that statement of ignorance is bliss, or the truth of it being ignorance is not bliss. It's like people will listen to Cameron talking about, you know, what he does with his children, and people are like, oh, what an arrogant asshole. He thinks his kids, he's just parading his children around, marketing them, and he just wants to show off. It's like, no,
That's all true, by the way.
Well,
Like, I know you're going to say, no, I don't. I am arrogant. But I don't see that as a bad thing.
As in the point of that being that if you found something that works, like a researcher discovering a fucking new rock that could power like the electricity for the entire world, and he wanted to share that.
Discovering? Discovering?
I don't know. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you guys.
It's a CO2 scrubber rock.
Okay.
I
So
bit
that's how
this shit
it
out of
You
my
bit your
tongue, like really hard, like 2 days ago. And this whole video, I've been going like this.
Oh, I thought you were just trying to like signal something to me.
And so
like some
if
kind of
I'm talking
lizard
funny,
thing.
that's what it is. It's just,
No, but you're right though. Like you're right though. Like if you saw something that worked, you would want to share it, right?
Mm-hmm. And so the point is, you know, people would look at that and then they would totally just not even consider what you're saying. They're like, oh, he's just doing this because I'm like, okay, well. And it's funny because the people who say that, they'll be like, well, those kids are really amazing. But my kids can't be like that. And what you're suggesting is like, okay, if we forget about it, if that wasn't even Cameron's, it was some other people's kids and we were seeing that, we'd be like, yeah, objectively, those kids are amazing. They're surpassing every kind of developmental benchmark that's being set forth by mainstream society, right?
Yeah.
And the point of that being, it's not about it being our kids. It's about, and we're not just doing things based off how we feel, so you can't replicate it. It's, guys, look at what happens when you live by these principles.
Yeah.
If you live by these principles too, you'll have the same result. Isn't that what you want? No, you're an arrogant asshole, all this stuff. It's coming from the starting point of, I don't want to question things. And the result of that, it's not ignorance is bliss. It's they have to go through the terrible twos. They have to go through that, oh, they're a teenager now. You know how teenagers are, the hormones and all that stuff. Like they
hate
just
their parents.
They just hate their parents and they hate, exactly, right? It's like the consequence to actual ignorance is not bliss. You create that in your mind because you're not willing to go through hell in a moment where you have to go through that cognitive dissonance or whatever the case may be, where you have to be like, oh my God, like, my child's 3 and I kind of been abusing them a little bit with the way I treat them. But if you're willing to go through that now, then you won't create all the consequences that you're creating that will far exceed beyond what you could predict today. In the same way that me, Drake, Mitchell, we don't have kids right now. So why do we care about parenting? It's because we know we're going to be parents and the process starts way beforehand. In the same way that if you're going to be successful in business, it's just going to be because of who you are, what you'll accept, right? If you're going to be a successful parent, if you're accepting some bullshit in yourself, you're going to end up allowing that in your child. If you're accepting some bullshit of not being willing to question things, and you're like, why won't the left listen? Why won't the right listen? it's the same reason why the points are equal is what I'm saying.
They're
And
saying
that's
the
why
same
we
thing
say
about you.
exactly, right?
Exactly the same.
And so that's why it always comes back to self-honesty, but self-honesty is going to be a manifestation of your confidence in your ability to learn. Or another way to say that is your confidence in your ability to change. Where you hear some information that's in conflict with what you've currently accepted, but you're not afraid to look at them, even though it hurts, because the truth hurts. And you care about finding out the truth more than you care about just being happy and being comfortable. Because the truth is, that is the exact thing that's going to keep you unhappy and uncomfortable. You're just forgetting all the times that it created that in your life, right?
You
That's
know,
all.
that point, well, that point you brought up of when you're playing that game of judging things as superior, inferior, what is it, why is the person doing that? What are they getting out of that? What is it?
A feeling.
Yeah,
It's like an
feeling.
energy you're getting from it.
Yeah.
So that is what that's the truth of the pursuit of happiness. See what I mean? And it ties in everything together, because it's like, well, think about what it means to be a billionaire. Do you want to be a billionaire in this world, or do you want to be a billionaire where everybody's billionaires? And so if you do want to be a billionaire in this world, why? Is it to experience being a billionaire, or is it so that you can make a difference? Because I always like to say this to people: you weren't destined to be a billionaire. The system didn't choose you, didn't ordain you to be a billionaire. So if you want to be a billionaire, the only way you're gonna be able to do it, or if you want to be a millionaire, 100 millionaire, if you want to have like that lifestyle that you're imagining that you can't have, that you don't have right now, the only way to do that for you is to align yourself with what's best for all. Because you're gonna have to create that for yourself so that other people listen to you. We're going to have to stand in the position of other people want to listen to us.
As another way of saying what you're saying is, right now, everybody can't get rich, right? And,
it's not how the system works.
And you might be one of the people who want to get rich, but just because you want it doesn't mean anything. As in, if you don't focus yourself on creating a system that's best for all, right now, the people that it's not best for is you.
Yeah.
Like, you're the one who is at
wishing
the mercy
you could be
of,
rich. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You're on the losing end right now, which is why you desire to be. But because it's coming from a starting point of fear of being poor and so forth, you're not going to create it. And you're not really even knowing what it's going to take for you to do it in that way, which when you know about the stuff that Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all these guys really participate in, it's not pretty stuff. I don't think anybody really wants. It's like if you were actually that ruthless, you would have no problem getting there very quickly. Or when I say quickly, I mean as long as it takes in the context of the system. So that's really what I see as what we're doing is we're looking for those who, it's like maybe you got here because you want more for yourself. So maybe there's like a self-interest part, but that's not bad. Wanting more for yourself and wanting to have a good life where you experience a lot of fun and enjoyment in itself is not bad. It's just when you start justifying keeping the world and the system and everything the way it is so that you can have it, that's where the problem comes in, because you already don't have it. You're already, like you just said, if you're already experiencing the consequence of having accepted that world and being on the losing end, which is why you feel like things aren't going the way you want. So you can either be honest about it and then look at, okay, what actually needs to change? Because it's not just me. It's not just the world. It's both. Both of these things have to change. And the only potential that I have for really, it's like Kevin Trudeau says, at the end of the day, everybody just wants to feel good. The billionaire lifestyle, the plane, the beautiful women, the whatever it is because the person thinks that ultimately it's going to give them that bliss. But I think one of the most key points that we touched on today that Mitch brought up was that point of it's already feeling really good. That doesn't mean it can't get better. And that's a really cool point. It can get better. It can always get better. So that's also a point of self-sabotage where it's like, oh, well, I mean, I'm at the limit of my experience of happiness and so forth, which is actually where everybody's at. It's just self-sabotage. So we're literally, on the one hand, saying we want to be happy and blissful and happiness is the purpose of life. But on the other hand, doing everything possible to sabotage ourselves from ever experiencing that as an actual reality and accepting something far less. It's like it's like you want to go like what's a really good chef, Drake?
Oh, Francis Maman.
Joël
Never heard of him.
Robuchon.
Robuchon,
Okay.
Maman. It's like that's the idea you have in your head, and you're like, yeah, I want to experience a meal by that person, right?
Yeah.
And then you go buy the TV dinner that they branded in the
Okay.
in the supermarket.
That's gross.
You know what I mean? Which is just their way of making some money or something. And you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting the Robuchon meal, you know, but it's like, no, you're not, dude. you're just like, you have no idea. You don't even know what flavors are possible. You have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's what I see too, is that you don't really understand what real happiness is. You don't understand. You may know this in some areas, but it's like, look at the areas where there's actual limitation in your life. And actually I said that just to make you feel better. You don't know it.
Yeah.
Like you really don't know it, what it's like when you have a relationship with your wife where you're really unified within a sense of purpose. And then so parenting becomes easier because you're not constantly in conflict and your children are not. There's no point where my son or my daughter will come to me and ask me for something. And then when I say no or whatever, go to my wife and ask her. Because they know it's going to be the same answer.
Damn. I took that for granted right away.
What do you mean?
As in, I know that with your children,
Oh, yeah.
but it's something in terms of why that is. It's really profound from the perspective of that's what I would do, because I know that my parents weren't on the same page. What my mom says no to, my dad would say yes to, and vice versa. And it's like, just those little points. They were a symptom of something, but they created problems. But in terms of the bigger picture of every point in a relationship where you're not on the same page,
Yeah.
it's like, it's a much bigger.
My
than you
parents
think.
got divorced when I was 2. And then my mom remarried, and then her and my new dad got divorced when I was like 7.
Laugh about it.
That's because they were not unified. They were just 2 individuals pursuing their own happiness and self-interest. And the relationship seemed like it'd be expedient towards that.
And you fit into me while I wanted this thing, but now like you don't fit anymore. So
Yeah, I've extracted all the energy and experience I could out of this. Something nice and new came along.
I'm bored.
Let me
you're
go do that.
boring. Yeah.
It's like if you're playing a video game and you're on one of these websites where it's like you have like 1,000 games you can choose from, and you play one for a minute, you're like, just go to the next one. And then you're like, this is so fucking boring. Like, what's the point of doing this?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you'd rather have something limited in that context because at least you can focus on it. Now, I'm not saying when you should limit things in that situation, but it's really what your starting point is. It's like, why are you doing it? Why are you in the relationship? What's the purpose of it? And so when you make it based on this pursuit of feeling and so forth, maybe we could do a whole podcast on this point, but it's like, what is that really is your, well, I think we talked about this on a previous one.
It was
know, it's
before
like-
the podcast when we did the 5 of us, us plus Kian, and we did the relationship thing. So what are you talking about? That was on for a Facebook Live.
Oh,
Remember?
well, I was
That
thinking about
before
the point of
podcast.
being like a machine. You're just taking energy.
Oh
yeah.
no,
You know,
that was
which means it's like an energy, a battery has a positive and a negative charge. And like once one's depleted, it doesn't go back to the other side unless you do something to put it back on the other side. So it's like, you're not realizing that what you're calling emotions and feelings and thinking that they're like this human thing that's like, you're right. And it's so amazing. And it's what it means to be human is literally, you're just arguing to be a robot that's controlled by the flow of energy in your circuits. And why do we even think emotions and feelings are so valuable except somebody else argued for it? You know, and they told us about poetry and it's like, oh, there's feelings and there's like this transcendent experiences and all this shit. And it's like, all of that is preventing us from really sorting out this world to a physical condition where everybody has what they need.
Yeah.
Because when that's the case, dude, there's no more conflict.
Yeah.
Not at that level. I mean, not at any level we're aware of. There's going to be layers to this, but when everybody has what they need, like, can you guys really, I know I can't actually imagine it. I'm not trying to imagine. I'm not trying to imagine it. I just know through common sense that if everybody had what they needed, there would be so much more available for us to do as a human race, but also as a planet. Like nature would cooperate with us even more.
Yeah.
Because right now it's like it has to defend itself from us in a way. What were you gonna say, Drake?
I was going to say life would be totally different. And it's funny, just listening to everything that we've covered just so far in this podcast. It's like that phrase, 5 minutes to learn, a lifetime to master. Like everything that we're saying sounds so simple. And, this is something that I remember from, just in my beginnings of talking to you, Cameron, where you'd say things and I'd go, yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But like, I don't know why it makes sense, And as I continued more and more, doing my own research, doing my own self-honesty, doing my own like understanding and improving my own processing ability, I found it kind of like in a moment, all of a sudden, like I'd be doing all this work and then all of a sudden it would just click. One thing would just click and I'd go, oh, that's really what he meant. Like I've been hearing him say this, and go ahead.
The important point for someone to realize within this is none of us are looking for somebody to just take what we're saying and accept it as valid.
Exactly.
That's what you're expected from in school. That's what we're trained to do in school.
Right.
An authority or someone you respect or you perceive to have some answer says something, you have to accept it and just repeat it back. And you really don't understand it. And you don't understand it. And they know you don't understand it.
Yeah.
But this is what you're saying is the confirmation of this point, which is I or someone else might say something that makes sense. But if you're not yet at the point where you're processing it, and you may have to go through some experience over time to realize the consequence of, like, in other words, if there's something you're not yet able to or willing to be self-honest about because it's such a deep layer within you of like covered up by levels of things that you've accepted, you might have to experience a consequence where then you're like in that moment. We talked about the limit experience, right?
Yeah.
That's what the real limit experience is from my perspective. It's when you're in that moment of consequence where you're like, you're not in the reality you thought you were in anymore. You're still here in physical reality, but you're not in your delusion anymore for a moment. Something just slapped you in the fucking face and you're like, oh shit. And in that moment, you have that choice to be like, I need to be honest with myself about this. Or, oh no, I create my own reality. I'm pursuing my happiness, blah, blah. You just start covering it back up and you go right back into it.
Yeah.
But it's not a pretty thing. And so I kind of get where the philosophers were going with it. You know what I mean? Like it's at the edge of negative experience. It's in those moments where your life is not working. You see what I mean? And you have to maybe get to that point in some cases. But the real point here is none of us are looking for anyone to just accept information and then just repeat it. We're simply sharing our experience, our process. This podcast is a part of our own process.
Yeah.
This is a part of my process of explaining things and explaining myself and sharing myself more and learning more in the process and uncovering the points that I still am not aware of yet. This is a part of that. But then sharing with other people the tools so you can start taking this on for yourself. So you can come to the same conclusions. We're not afraid. It's like, think about it. Instead of a teacher saying, I'm going to write on the board all the things to memorize, and then they don't even give you a book, which is what happens in the schools now. They just give you worksheets, you learn it. They don't even give you a book anymore. What we're saying is, look, you can come and listen to these podcasts. You should participate in the group so you get with other people. That's an aspect of being a human being that's important. So you might as well be around people who are on this path, this process with you, than people who are going to try to like take you away from it if that's what you want to do.
Right.
But go and use the tools. You don't have to listen to this. Like if you find it interesting and you find value in what we're saying in these podcasts, listen to the podcasts, like share them with other people. Create your own podcast based on your application of things. Come and join us. Let us know, like reach out to us, right? Participate. But the real point is to use the tools so that you can come to these same conclusions. Because when you're processing information and you're being honest with yourself, there's only one reality. The reality is either that child is starving or they're not. All the other parts is the not reality. It's the hyper reality. It's whatever you want to call it. It's the parts where you're creating your own opinions and your own justifications and everything because of it. But if you were that child, what would you be experiencing?
Would you want to swap places with that kid?
Right, exactly. You would be in that physical reality, that situation. None of the other stuff would matter. Like the person saying to you, well, you created your own reality. Like imagine that would be a great one. Like the child is like literally starving to death, and like there's like a vulture pecking at like some wound on their leg, but they've got their headphones on, they're listening to Abraham Hicks seminar. And they're like, I create my own reality, and they're like trying to get this buzzard or this vulture away from them. You know what I mean?
Imagine,
It's like
imagine you're in the ocean, right? You listening to this, and you're in the ocean, and you are drowning, and you're like, "Fuck! Like I swam out too far. I'm fucking drowning." And the lifeguards were like, "Okay, well, he created this in his reality. So should we save him? Should we not?" You're like, "Okay, let's talk about that. But can you fucking save me, please? Because if you don't, I'm
they've
going
got
to
their
die."
Abraham Hicks seminar through the megaphone. Dear one, you are at the cutting edge of time. You must focus.
You're the
on
leading
your
edge of
bliss.
creation. Yeah.
You're like, I'm on the cutting edge of death.
I'm watching this because I need to experience contrast so that I know what I need to do to motivate myself in order to do what I want to do in my life. So I got to watch this drowning person just drown. Sorry, man. I know I'm a lifeguard, and I know I practice, and I was put through a system that I do have the ability to come save you.
No, hold on. It's even better, Asif. It's even better. That lifeguard in that moment of choice, they're like, wait, why the fuck am I a lifeguard? I want to be a billionaire. Ding, and they like to become a billionaire. There's no one there to fucking save them. Like, if you create your own reality, why do we have lifeguards? It's just so delusional. You know, and it's like, I get it, because at the same time, what is of value in something like Abraham Hicks is the understanding that your thoughts and what you believe and all of that is manifesting reality, but it's doing it in a collective way. And there's things that are automated in our world that we're not doing in a conscious way. You know, like the food supply and things like that, and the water and all this stuff. We're not consciously focusing on that. And so the problem with when you are not yet at a vocabulary where you can see the value in something like Abraham Hicks, but also see the problems, like.
So for example, you do create your own reality. As in, there's one reality, and each of us are a part of it. And because of all the acceptances and everything that we believe in, all that stuff, that's what's creating reality.
Yes.
And we're talking about that phrase when it's used in a specific context, right?
Where a person uses it just to justify, like, I'm not a millionaire right now, or I'm not a billionaire, or whatever their particular goal is, because
There's something in my vibrational field that's producing counter.
but I create my reality. So as long as I keep imagining it's going to happen, it's going to eventually happen. And they're not taking any direct.
Cameron, I remember like 3 times when I was imagining something, and then I swear,
And you saw
like,
1111 on your calculator.
A year later, that exact thing happened.
Yeah.
It-
Right.
And then I was happy. Like I was picturing myself eating ice cream.
And I got goosebumps.
Oh,
You know what's funny is yeah, that's a good one. You know, you ever heard this thing about the reticular activating system?
yeah, reticular formation, reticular activator system.
Is that what it is? And they say it's like you, when you think about something a lot, you see it everywhere. Your brain or your mind or whatever is designed to like pick up on it. And people take that as when they start seeing the thing a lot in their reality, that means it's getting close to them having it.
No way. That's how they interpret that. That's how people interpret.
But they were told it's because you were focusing on it.
Yeah.
But they're using it as feedback because they think, well, if I'm focusing on it, that's what's making my reticular whatever formation thing
Right.
show it to me in my reality, which means I'm on track for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, look, it's showing that I'm focused on it, and it's my focus that creates reality.
So let me
It's
ask you
my
a question. Like, how many Teslas did Elon Musk see before they created one? Like, is that what he was focusing on?
No.
Or was he like, who do I need to talk to? The engineers, the get the capital funding and all this stuff. Like, he wasn't like the stuff that people believe is. So what's interesting is when you look at it, all this kind of, you have people in reality who are not okay with what they've been given, but they're in that place in our society where they could, because of their position, move up. Meaning they're not in survival mode 100%. Like there's no space or time for them to even like watch a video or listen to a podcast. Like they have that time. But then there's all this information that's given to them that says a bunch of shit that keeps them, that doesn't give them the solution of how to change. So it sounds nice. It keeps them in their path. They'll never make a difference. They'll never challenge the system. And people don't realize perhaps that there's literally a war going on, a battle, war, whatever you want to call it, for our minds. Like, that's what advertising is. That's what marketing is. That's what politics is. That's what education system. It's all designed to try and keep everyone in this world just staying as slaves to the system, not challenging anything, not, and it's funny because you'll have people on the right who will talk about slavery and be like, well, even Kanye West said this, like, why didn't they just like walk off? Like, that sounds like they were choosing to be there or something. And it's like, okay, we're all choosing to be in this system right now.
Why don't we just go make another system?
Right. Well, you're choosing to continue focusing on just the energetic feeling value of something rather than, is that actually best for you to do? Like, is it best for you right now to argue with your wife because you're right while you're also yelling and scaring your children? That's what my parents were like, throwing plates at each other and shit. Like, think of what that did to me internally, And so now, how are you going to change that? So this is the only, and it's not that we're trying to take credit for inventing any of this, or that's not what we're saying. We're just saying we're actively a point that's promoting these points.
Yeah.
But this is the only place, if you go to the Destiny website, in these individual points, yes, but this is a point, all of these together, the things that we're promoting is the only points that are the real solution to a person changing and doing something about this problem that we're all finding ourselves in this reality, because it goes to the core of physically how we function. Like, let me ask you guys a question. Is there more than one way, if you're having a problem with your computer, is there more than one solution to that problem?
No, I mean, you're just like multiple ways to find the problem. Like when you're troubleshooting, when you're getting on the phone with someone, they'll say, turn it off, turn it back on again, and then try this and then try that. But ultimately it's one thing that's going to work. Exactly.
Right. So there's only, and it may be multiple problems. What I'm saying is, if you take those as collectively as one thing, there's only one way to fix it.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're, does it make sense? Like, there's only one solution.
Yeah.
Because the problem itself can be broken down into what are the actual inconsistencies that's causing the issue. Those need to be corrected. Once they're corrected, then you have the solution. Now, there may be a couple ways of diagnosing it and looking at it and so forth. But at the end of the day, unless you flip that switch that way, it's not going to change.
As in, if there's a screw that requires a square head, and I'm like, yo, you need to have this square head in order to turn that screw. And someone's like, are you saying that's the only way that I can?
How do you know it's the only way I can do it? And it's like, it
just look at it.
Logically.
Square.
Isn't that good news though? Isn't that like, oh, fuck. Okay, wait. Here's the bigger issue. Instead of focusing on, oh, you guys seem really certain and there's only one way to do it. It's like, that means we can all talk and get behind it and show our process and support other people to do it. And we actually have a way to make a difference, to change this world, to support people to change. So it's like, if you actually want to create your reality, well, this is the way to do it. Because if you don't change what's going on with you on the hard drive level of your computer, the output's not going to be different. And that's what these tools are about. It's about changing things at the hardware level. But you have to be honest with yourself that there's a problem. You don't know how to change. Everything you've been doing up to this point in your life has been getting really hyped up on something, getting sold on it, and then because your starting point was looking for energy anyways, that eventually faded because that's how energy works. It goes up and down, and then you went on to the next thing. But the problem is, you're not the same age you were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And you don't know when your last day is going to be. So now it's time to get serious and look at the world, man. Like 2020, I'm grateful for all of this. It's like, finally we can all fucking wake up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No more delusions.
Right,
nobody has any room for delusions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
actually really cool. I don't want people to suffer, but they were already, anybody who's like, oh, you just want people to suffer. It's like, did you know 6.4 million children died of preventable causes in 2018? Where was the protest for them? Where was anybody doing anything? And then they're like, oh, I'm going to wear a mask outside because I really care about others. Like, well, you didn't have a problem just going along with our systems of fucking consumption for no reason. when people were starving as a direct result of that. You didn't care. So it's all just virtue signaling total bullshit that people say that stuff. Right? And it's just, again, not willing to be self-honest. Because if you're honest, the reason why you're wearing a mask is you're afraid of getting the virus because you're not really certain about, will I get sick or won't I? Or you're afraid of other people's reactions, or you have low self-esteem and you want people to think you're a good person. Like, there's a whole fucking range of reasons why you would do it. Or there's a specific context where you don't have a choice, and self-honestly, it makes sense to do it to get to the next point so you can move on with the next point you need to do. So it comes down to self-honesty. Because you also have people who say, well, I'm not going to wear a mask because I'm not a slave. It's like, you're a fucking slave. Don't pretend like you're not. But so again, it's not comply or rebel. It's about transcend. Look at the context and the common sense of the situation and remove the fear points, and then make the decision based on that. But that is a process that takes time to get to the point where it's like you're going to trust yourself in every moment to do that. Because it's that moment where you don't do it or you do it, that's where you display your self-trust.
Yeah. So someone listening in on this who they're saying, okay, you know, a lot of what you guys said made sense. I'd like to start doing this. How do I get to your understanding? I don't fully understand everything. I don't know it like you guys know it. How do I get to that point? What would you direct them to do?
Go
I'd
ahead,
say
Bob.
definitely
Go
apply
ahead.
it. First off, apply to the
yeah.
group by go to self-perfected.com. Then connect with people in that group, because you will start to see what it looks like, self-honesty in action. And then go on self-perfected.com/principles to see what these principles are. Even if you've already looked at them, look at them again in a new unit of time. So those are two straightforward ways to do it. And then DIP Lite for sure, which is, we have that included in the free resources on the website.
So it's like where you're at right now in your life. Think about how you're kind of just subject to how you're feeling day to day. You're subject to whatever comes into your environment day to day. You saw some video, it made you sad. You saw some video, it made you angry. Somebody said something, blah, blah, blah. Every single point, this is the last point I want to make, is that in terms of on that line of thinking that, you know, reality is subjective, we create our reality, is the last point that kind of people use as a foundational point, that, or foundational assumption that means that I don't have to change, is that we pick up energy from other people. We pick up energy from other places in the world. And we pick up energy if, you know, that person gave me a bad vibe or whatever the case may be. If you were walking down a dark alley and it was late at night and there was a person walking with their shoulders forward and they were hooded and they had their hands in their pocket and they were walking really fast and they were walking close by you, what would you feel?
Probably scared.
Probably scared, a little bit anxious. Would you say that's because that person's giving you bad vibes?
Kind of. I think that's what people would say, is because like it looks like a menacing character.
Right? It's like, what if that image is just triggering something inside of you that is generating that feeling? Right? And it's funny because when I ask people that, they're like, no, it's what they actually say is, well, no, that person's not giving me that vibe. It's like, yeah, I got to protect myself because I know, you know, that might, it might be a dangerous situation. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And your body has developed this response to protect you, right? And so the point of that is to say that that is true in every fucking case, where it's not you're upset because somebody was mean to you, and you're upset because, something happened and that person's an asshole, that person's being a bitch or whatever. This is the part that requires real honesty. It requires you to shift out of the system and the government and all the people to it's me. It's right in here. It's happening all right here. And the reason why self-honesty is such a significant point is that you have to realize that everything in your life is the accumulation or the culmination of all your beliefs. And if you don't have everything that you want, or you're not absolutely clear that you're on the path to having everything you want. Jeez, I don't know what the heck that was.
That was lightning. Like really close to me. Yeah.
Stay alive, Drake. Then if you don't have everything you want, or you don't see that you're on the path to having everything you want, it's time now to question what you have accepted. It's time now to question those fundamental assumptions or those fears or those excuses that you use to not look at information, to not listen to whether it be the left or the right or Destiny or Cameron or Mitchell or Drake or Asif or these guys are arrogant or that person said it in a mean way and all that bullshit. What if that is the thing that you need to be looking at in order to not just get what you want out of life, but to make sure that everybody has that? Because what Cameron was saying earlier of self-interest isn't a bad thing. We just want everybody to be able to focus on their self-interest. Because the truth is, the more money you have, the more you can separate yourself from reality. If you don't have money, you are experiencing the realness of this world. That the world doesn't give a shit about you, that there's real struggle in this world. If you have money, then you have the liberty to have all these stupid ass, dumbass beliefs because it serves you to not actually have to change. In the same way that Bill Gates doesn't have to give a shit about what's going on in the world. No matter what, he's going to be good. If you have a job that is providing for you, then you can have whatever beliefs you want because what you're doing doesn't actually have to line up with physical reality. But so long as you're carrying beliefs that is not actually considering all pieces of the puzzle, then maybe it's not just going to be in your job. Maybe it's in your family life. Maybe it's the relationship with your kids, with your spouse. You're going to create consequences. And what we're saying is we're not saying go read this book and that's going to solve it all and go, listen to these audios and that's going to solve it all. We're saying work on your foundational ability to question yourself. What you'll find at the Self Perfected website is the links to the group in Self Perfected. You'll find links to Destiny, where everything that we talk about is just the process of becoming self-honest, letting go of what you held on to, and changing. And we're just sharing our accounts of that because the truth is, before this process, I didn't know how to explain what was going on inside of me. I didn't know precise. I knew that I felt emotions. I knew that I felt stuff, and I could classify them as emotions. But the only way that we can actually change things is if we understand them. And we're talking about fundamentally understanding what's going on inside of you, what's going on in this world, what's going on with each individual, because the truth is, we're basically the same. Basically. And what works for you, or what you think you deserve or need, that should be for everybody. That's all we're saying.
Why don't we leave it at that, guys?
Rock and roll.
Good stuff. So check out the website, self-perfected.com. Check out the group. Apply the points. Study them. Interact with us. Send us a message if you have some questions or whatever, and we'll see.
Send us some hate mail too.
Send us hate mail. Yeah, I'm okay with that because you're not going to change my mind. So that's pretty cool. Not a lot of people don't like that certainty, but that's what we need in this world, is certainty about what is the issues and what is the solution.
Because people are certain in complete bullshit. So it's okay to be certain in the truth too, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks everybody for the conversation. We'll see y'all on the next one.
Bye.